The conspiracy theory that's almost too believable to ignore. That your phone's microphone is constantly hot and it's listening for keywords to target advertising. Most glaring instance where this happened to me was when I walked into a colleague's office. He'd just gotten a standing desk, but one that goes on top of his existing desk rather than a standalone model. That's important to note. I said, "Hey, nice standing desk. Where did you get that?" "Oh, thanks. Just today," he replied. That was literally all that was said about the desk. We talked about work-related stuff, and as I walked out and checked my phone, there was an ad on Facebook for that exact model of standing desk. I've never owned one, wanted one, or Googled one before, yet there it was on my feed. Tinfoil hat be damned, those guys are listening to us. I've had this happen to me twice in the last month. Things I talk about with my daughter, one being hard-boiled eggs, showed up on my feed hours later. There it was, an ad for a hard-boiled egg cooker. I've never Googled anything about those things. It's weird as heck. I can't remember the first one. When I said something to my daughter about it after the first time, she called me crazy. When I showed her the egg thing, she said, "Well, damn, you might be right." That Natasha Giat was murdered by the Catholic Church for exposing an Argentinian ring of preverts. Natasha Giat, a model/TV journalist, exposed a ring on live Argentinian TV a while ago, after following cases over the last few years. She'd claimed that she wouldn't commit self-deletion in April of 2018 while investigating those rings, but she was found on February 23, 2019, to be dead from that very thing. Another journalist she had accused of similar crimes on the airing, Louis Ventura, had uploaded an image of her body shortly after she was found on Twitter, and then promptly deleted it afterwards. That Michael Jackson was chemically castrated by his father to preserve his soprano singing voice, which was the source of his infatuation with children. That there have been hundreds of companies that operate tens of thousands of Reddit accounts each day. They've been auto-regging these accounts for years. They use scripts to auto-post and comment, and have humans that sift through all of the accounts to make various comments to maintain them. These companies have the ability to control and game their way to the front of Reddit. Huge brands use them, special interest groups use them, and political parties use them. It's not a conspiracy, it's a real thing. Well, this comment was written in 2018, and while it might have seemed like shocking news then, with the greater proliferation of AI and the potential realization of the dead internet theory, I think it seems basically trivial now. I'd believe that it was happening then. The arms on a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton are backwards. They ought to be rotated 180 degrees. Seriously, what good are those stubby little arms for? We found out relatively recently that T-Rex had feathers. It's now an established fact. T-Rex were not covered in scales, but in feathers, like a bird. Take the arms on a T-Rex and flap them around 180 degrees, and now you have wings like an ostrich. We used to think of almost all dinosaurs as lizard-like. In fact, the name means terrible lizard. Now we know that many different animals that we think of as dinosaurs were more bird-like than lizard-like. Tyrannosaurus Rex had wings. Not big wings to fly with, but wings that were perhaps something like that of an ostrich, cassowary, or emu, although likely much smaller in proportion to their body. Ostriches used their wings in mating rituals to make themselves appear larger and to signal and communicate. Perhaps T-Rex used theirs for something similar. They didn't have useless, stubby little arms. Okay, so here's my conspiracy theory. Facebook purposely attempts to ruin people's relationships because the drama gets more views, and more views sell more ads. Several years ago, they introduced a feature so that your comments on other pages would show up in your friends' feeds. So if you're secretly an atheist and you comment on some atheist page, it shows up in your devout Southern Baptist Grandma Muriel's timeline, even though it's a conversation that has nothing to do with her and there's no reason for it to be. As a result, Facebook outs you to your family, and Grandma is typing away at all of the evil Satanists trying to corrupt her grandson. And if you comment on a public post, it's unavoidable. You used to be able to control who could see your comments, even on public posts by other pages, but at the same time Facebook introduced their tattletale feature, and they took that ability away. Now if they were to stumble across the same page, they'd be able to see your comment. But after that change, Facebook started pointing everybody you know directly to it. Not to mention, the privacy settings are more difficult to find, difficult to understand, and with each passing year gives you less and less control over who sees what. By forcibly combining everybody's social circles, Facebook is trying to generate conflict. They want to generate conflict because the conflict happens on Facebook, which means people logging onto Facebook more often and seeing more ads. They're essentially an internet tabloid, except instead of showcasing the personal drama of celebrities for clicks and sales, they're doing it to you instead. Ever notice how the vast majority of family dramas, relationship fights and stuff, these days they happen on Facebook? That's by design. Facebook is literally destroying the social fabric to make a buck, consuming relationship stability like it's an oil refinery consuming crude. All rocks are soft until you go touch them. Sounds like my… never mind. I think that the ballistic missile threat that was sent to Hawaii's cell phones saying, "Seek shelter, this is not a drill," that was later deemed as a mistake, was in fact a real missile that was intercepted before impact. That William Shakespeare never wrote any of the works that have been attributed to him. I don't think I believe the theory 100%, but the lack of evidence to support him as a writer is amusing. You see, William Shakespeare was born, lived and died in a small town that consisted of not much more than sheep farmers. His father made sheepskin gloves. Certainly not the life that would have contributed to the knowledge of the many royal topics of Shakespeare's works. Surely the true author of Shakespeare's works would have had the means to travel and learn of all the worldly topics that his works were based on. We do know that he did own the Globe Theatre and that he did work there as an actor. There's no record of his attendance at any schools. He was raised in an illiterate household, and both of his parents signed all legal documents with a mark, which is a sign of illiteracy. There are 6 surviving signatures of Shakespeare, all of them look as if a 4-year-old wrote them. They were all most assuredly written by an illiterate person. All of the signatures were found on documents such as a mortgage contract and his will. There are no surviving original written literary works written by Shakespeare either. There are no surviving personal letters written by him. Surely a letter written from Shakespeare would have been coveted as a prized possession, surely destined to survive to the present day. For contemporary example, all of Mozart's handwritten letters professing his desire to poop on his cousin's face have survived to this present day, but not a single letter written by Will Shakespeare has. The only surviving written documents written in his hand were his will and a few other small pieces. All pieces of his writing that have been found were written in what's called a secretary hand, a very basic form of writing typically used by poorly educated people. There are no surviving official documents that recall him as being a writer in any way. All official documents state that he was a businessman and a real estate owner. Shakespeare's will made no mention of any assets related to writings, books, or anything of that nature. All of these facts paint a picture of a scenario where someone paid William Shakespeare to use him as a pseudonym for their own writings, and perhaps used his position as the owner of a theatre as their own personal value. The best theory about the true authorship was Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. He was well known to be a gifted poet and playwright. He was also known to sponsor companies of actors, and he was a patron of some of the most well-known theatres. Oxford wouldn't have been at liberty to write about the topics found in Shakespeare's works. The only compelling evidence that I've heard from Shakespeare supporters are anecdotes written years after his death by people who knew Shakespeare and referring to him as a writer. I don't find them compelling at all, to be honest. If Shakespeare made an arrangement to act as the author of someone else's works, surely such an arrangement would require Shakespeare to lie to everyone. I'm certain that all of his friends thought he was a writer. The rich orchestrated the recession back in 2008 to take advantage of the market. Memes about the NSA and other spy programs are encouraged by the very agencies spying on us to twist the idea into the absurd and to humanize their agents. Miley Cyrus's crazy streak was all a carefully planned marketing scheme to get her solidified as an A-list celebrity. I believe it was done to make Disney completely cut ties with her and kill the image of Hannah Montana. And it worked, too. Hannah Montana was quite possibly Disney's largest TV show ever, but I haven't seen anyone even mention it in a decade now, despite Disney cashing in on old IPs like Aladdin, Kim Possible and The Lion King. We have yet to hear even an unsubstantiated rumor regarding Hannah Montana. Honestly, if that's true, good on her. Breaking out of your niche as a child star is hard enough without the mega corporation of Disney trying to force you back into it with all of the legal matter under the sun. Much easier to just start acting out and being as overtly adult as possible so that no children's film will touch you for a while. The Vatican holds horrible dark secrets and many answers to existential questions. And that Area 51 is a publicity stunt by the government to hide the real testing facility. The Vatican has many vaults literally stuffed with thousands of documents that nobody but people in the Pope's circle have access to. Who knows what's in those? I'm willing to bet that there are parts of the Bible and Christian history that will never see the light of day thanks to Emperor Constantine creating the first official canon of the Bible. YouTube in a mobile browser is so crappy so that they can force you to use the app and not use an ad blocker. I have long argued to friends and family that Barack Obama might have been a CIA operative sometime in between college and being a community organizer in Chicago. Bear with me here. After graduating from Columbia in 1983, Obama went to work for a company called Business International Corporation, a company that is known to have been used as a CIA front in the past. There's little information available about this time in Obama's life. The CIA was actively recruiting at that point in history, and might have been very interested in a young black man with an Ivy League education and ties to Indonesia and Africa. The information would most likely still be classified, but it could have also helped his rapid accession in politics at such a young age. After nursing this theory for a while, I finally Googled it, and sure enough, loads of websites tout similar theories. Some of it's even convincing. Not the stuff about him being a CIA chrononaut who fought Russians on the moon. That angle is, well, less convincing. Some organizations or groups of people wanted all of the Kennedys dead for some reason. The term conspiracy theory and its poor connotation was created by the US government specifically for skeptics of the official JFK assassination story. Just felt I should put that out there. Long John Silver's is some kind of money laundering scheme on the basis that they've been open for as long as I can remember, but I've also literally never seen a busy Long John's. Toxic delusion that I ironically entertain? Perhaps. Oh, you clearly didn't grow up in a white trash family. Long John Silver's is the poor man's Red Lobster. We'd eat fast food almost every night when I was growing up, and maybe once a month we'd get LJS. It was a real treat, let me tell you. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The president of the Philippines, Duterte, is very anti-substances to hide his own involvement with cartels, off of which he makes billions. Funnily enough, he once told supporters that if his own children were found to be dealing in them, they should be executed. Not long after that, one of his children was found to be involved with a big shipment of crystal, if I recall. That kid's still alive. Also, Duterte had a past substance issue with fentanyl that no one really knows if he's clean from, and he apparently smokes green herb. I think the CIA posted this question so that they know what the general public suspects. The Laurel Canyon Conspiracy. Basically, if you were to look at the counterculture revolutionaries in the music industry of the 60s, most of them were the children of military intelligence people. So the theory is that the free love, lots of substances movement that they inspired was done intentionally to distract the youth from full-scale revolution. The thought was, if the angry youth of the mid to late 60s were too dosed up and doing the deed all the time, they'd stop caring as much about societal ills and then basically sleepwalk through the 70s. Which they did. I stumbled upon this when I was reading up on Jim Morrison and how his father was the one who called in the fake strike at the Gulf of Tonkin that kicked off the Vietnam War, and which was shown later to have been a false flag. Turns out a lot of his contemporaries were also children of highly placed military people with ties to intelligence. Strange that they all wound up in Laurel Canyon as part of the same movement. Apple started the meme about AirPods being expensive as a marketing ploy. You know, that happened around Christmas 2018. You might be right. The value of expensive art is just a pseudo-currency for rich people to subtly buy substances or other illicit goods. Apparently priceless art on mega yachts is under a big threat from champagne corks. Cops go on ways and leave random police sightings to cause people to slow without actually having to stay and check on people. I think it's smart for them. It gets the job done of getting people to slow down without having to worry about pulling over a crazy person. Denver International Airport. Secret bunker, giant cult shrine, and potential concentration camp. There's a lot of conspiracy theories revolving around the Denver airport. I'll try to touch on all of the ones I know, but forgive me if I miss a few. There's no doubt that there are some odd things about the airport, from the delayed construction to the massive cost to the odd choice of decorations. Opening on February 28, 1995, 16 months behind schedule and at double the cost of the original estimate, totaling $4.8 billion, Denver International Airport is the largest airport in the US by total land area, 33,500 acres. Not long after it opened, wild conspiracy theories began floating around. One major theory is that there was a massive underground bunker that was built for the world's elite in the event of an apocalyptic event. Another is that there is a massive facility underneath that was built to be used as a concentration camp in the future. Some people believe that the reason for the delay in the schedule was due to the construction of said underground bunkers and tunnels. Supposedly, a construction worker claims they buried 5 multi-story buildings beneath and built the airport on top of it. Aside from the construction theories, there's plenty of things inside the airport that are just plain odd. One thing mentioned often is the large Mustang statue outside of the airport named Blucifer, a large blue horse with red eyes that supposedly represents one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: death. Oddly enough, the architect who designed the piece was killed when the horse's head fell on him, severing major arteries and causing what proved to be fatal injuries. Another thing people find odd is the dedication stone inside the airport. One of the first things you notice is the large Freemasons symbol in the middle of the stone. Another thing people point to is the date on the stone, March 19th, 1994, which if you add up the numbers 191994, you get 33, which is a significant number in the Freemasons, as I believe it is the highest level you can reach in the organization. The last odd thing about the dedication stone is that it says near the bottom, New World Airport Commission, Contributors. People believe this is a reference to the New World Order, which will supposedly be brought on by the Freemasons or Illuminati. Also noted by conspiracy theorists are the 4 odd and slightly disturbing murals that are displayed in the airport. Some people believe these murals are packed with Freemason iconography and occult references, and even are a telling of the future. In short, Denver Airport is a secret occult superbunker and has some really poor taste when it comes to decorations. Can some of our commenters maybe weigh in on this? I've been through this airport once, and it didn't really strike me as being particularly weird. But this is a long list of very particular blunders. I won't say it's true, but it is noteworthy that it has so many strange features and blunders. What the authorities say was that Mick Jagger was simply an iconic rock and roll star and nothing more. However, the song TikTok, as performed by Keisha, was written by a guy named Benny Blanco. Its lyrics include the line, "We kicked them to the curb unless they look like Mick Jagger." That's a little bit strange, right? Mick Jagger wasn't exactly at the height of his attractiveness when the piece in question came out. Stranger still, it wasn't the only popular song to paint the man in a pleasant light. Moves Like Jagger, performed by Maroon 5, was released at around the same time, and Benny Blanco also had a hand in writing that one. And this is where things start to get creepy. The song The Time, Dirty Bit, as performed by the Black Eyed Peas, features the following phrase. "All these girls, they like my swagger, they callin' me Mick Jagger, I be rolling like a stone." It was written by John DeNicola, who used to produce the music for a band called Kara's Flowers, although you might know them better by their current name of Maroon 5. The song Heart and Soul, as performed by the Jonas Brothers, contains a verse that ends with, "Making mistakes, but that won't matter if you can swag like old Mick Jagger." Antonina Almaso wrote the piece, and she is managed by Downtown Music Publishing. Care to guess who else they manage? Well, here's a hint. It rhymes with Balloon Hive. This web of connections extends all through the recording industry, but one thing remains unclear. What's the link back to Mick Jagger himself? There's got to be something, because if you only look at Google Trends, you'll see that his popularity spiked with the release of each song. The only time in recent memory when it's been higher is during a period in March of 2014, when his girlfriend died. Some people have suggested that the man's name is just easy to rhyme with. Swagger, right? But the popular usage of the word, in reference to something other than a walking gait, came about after the aforementioned songs had hit the airwaves. In other words, Jagger prompted swagger, not the other way round. Why does it seem to be a cabal of artists trying to artificially inflate the performer's appeal and popularity? What benefit is there in promoting an aging rock star? Who's actually behind this odd trend? In order to answer those questions, we need to turn to Vivendi. This is a company which owns a lot of stuff. Their subsidiaries include Dailymotion, Ubisoft, Gameloft, and the Universal Music Group. The Rolling Stones signed to Universal Music in 2008. In 2010, all of the songs listed above were released. Look at those Google Trends again. 2008 marked Mick Jagger's lowest ever dip in popularity, and the slump continued until February of 2010, right after TikTok became the most popular song on the radio. In September of the same year, the Rolling Stones re-released their Rare concert movie, securing the #1 spot on 4 different countries' charts, the US and the UK being 2 of them, second place on 4 more, and a double platinum certification in Canada. Strangely enough, though, the only other place besides the United States where platinum status was achieved was in France, which is where Vivendi is located. What if all of this was being carefully planned and executed? What if there's a shadowy organization that's intent on promoting Mick Jagger for their own profit? What if I made up all of this on a whim and just found whatever tenuous evidence I could to support it? In short, Mick Jagger is a puppet of the recording industry. The recommended food pyramid is created by the FDA, but the FDA is funded by a lot of certain food industries, poultry, and dairy. They in turn made the recommendation nutrition based off their funding by these companies, and not based on a well-balanced diet. There was an episode of The West Wing where they were redoing the pyramid into a plate. 4 portions of the plate and a glass of milk to the side. They had to scrap the idea because the cheese lobby was annoyed that milk was being represented as the only dairy, and Wisconsin is a swing state. Kennedy was killed by the CIA. I would never trust the CIA, and definitely not the 60s CIA. The CIA doesn't even trust the CIA. The government experiments on the mentally insane because nobody will believe someone with that kind of medical history. The Phantom Cosmonaut Conspiracy. Pretty much, the short story is that Yuri Gagarin was not the first man to go to space, but the first one to go and come back alive. It just seems like such a USSR thing to do. The oil and coal industries have invested heavily in killing off nuclear power as an attractive alternative. These days, we have reactor designs many times safer than other methods of generating power, and the waste issue is something that could be fixed with sufficient investment. Even taking into account disasters like Chernobyl, estimated around 4,000 premature deaths, and Fukushima, estimated 600 and counting, nuclear is incredibly safe compared to coal's 5,000 accidents per year. Nuclear kills 90 people per petawatt-hour generated, whereas coal kills 100,000 people per petawatt-hour, mainly because of lung problems worldwide. Even if we don't take into account the climate change contribution, most of these deaths are easily avoidable if we switch to nuclear. Multiple football World Cups have been influenced either by governments hosting them or other entities out for their own gain. 2002 South Korea and Japan, and 1978 in Argentina are the two most obvious ones that come to mind. I have a few that I love. First, Kobayashi the competitive eater is really just a fantastic up-close sleight-of-hand artist. Second, weather forecasters buy stock in supermarket chains and then over-exaggerate winter storms. And third, weather control. Shh. That Big Bread paid toaster manufacturers to put in a setting that's too high so that people would burn their toast, meaning that they sell more bread. The Reddit search function is intentionally bad. Or not purposely bad, but they know how to fix it but refuse to, all to encourage more new posts. Non-Americans. What is the most shocking thing you saw when visiting the United States? I'm Canadian, and I went on a brief road trip to the States about a month ago. The most shocking thing I experienced was how cheap the food is. We went to McDonald's and a meal for 3 people only cost about $14, and one of the meals was a salad. In Canada, one meal costs about $8. I knew the food was cheap there, but damn. Woke up early on vacation in Florida, and the sidewalk outside my hotel was absolutely covered in lizards, and it was amazing. How hard it is to get a drink. I'm Irish and over 21, and in California, even with a passport and driver's license, I was treated with skepticism. Blood started to enter my alcohol stream a few times while I was there. Ugh. Rite Aid. I can get a flu shot, HIV test, a bottle of tequila, Snickers bars, and pizza pockets all from the same store. Awesome. IHOP. I can get an entire day's worth of calories in one meal. Also, having $1 notes made me feel like I was rich. I had a huge wad of notes, but like 20 of them were $1. But still, it's a nice feeling. Speaking as a European who's visited America, this final part of the story is absolutely true. It feels special to whip out a stack of notes and slap them on the table like a mob kingpin. The first time I had to deal with TSA was enlightening. Wanted to punch the prick. Now I know that's basically normal. I'm from Singapore, and we're pretty much a conservative and reserved society. I visited the US for an elective program at UCLA, Go Bruins, and the thing that struck me most about America was everyone's friendliness or socialness. People strike up a conversation with you, ask how your day's been, and really connect with each other based on what's happening around them. The weather, how long the wait for the bus is, etc. And somehow, these fleeting connections were very real and genuine to me. I came back home a much more enlightened person with my horizons very much broadened. So thank you, Americans, for showing me simple human kindness. You have to flipping drive everywhere. Again, as a person from a country with a compact built environment, this resonates with me. My cousin from Vietnam flew into America sometime in December, and she recalled that her first reaction was, "Wow, there's so much sugar covering the ground." It was snow, but she really thought we sprinkled sugar everywhere for sweets and giggles. Why she's never heard of snow, I don't know, but it was adorably hilarious. As an Australian who just came back from America this year, what the flip, man? You guys have pretzel M&Ms. Share that stuff around. Flip! I was told I speak very good English. I'm English. My neighbor Dmitri visited New York once. He say there was surprising lack of goats, which may not be bad thing. In the South, how in your face the religion was. Signs up on cafes, it being referred to a lot in conversation, and just everywhere I got confronted by religion. The patriotism as well, such as flags being up in so many yards. I had heard this, but I guess I didn't expect it to be so much like the stereotypes I imagined in my head. I found Americans insanely friendly as well, much more so than expected, and this applied to all places I went to other than New York City. I lived in China until 1999/grade 5 in elementary school, then our family moved to Dallas, Texas. Within the next year, the following things were very surprising to me. Everything is ridiculously big, from the size of our apartment to people's houses to the size of roads to the length of time it takes to get downtown. We lived in North Dallas near Arapahoe and Hillcrest. School classrooms resembled something like a wonderland. There were bright colors everywhere. Tables are put together into clumps instead of ordered in neat rows from back to front. Then there were stuffed papier-mâché animals on the walls with people's names on it. Cute little mailboxes for everyone. TVs and computers in every classroom. A cafeteria filled with tasty foods and snacks. And a playground with swings. We were learning 400 times 5 equals 2,000 in math class. The nice people at church actually took their religion seriously. Actually believed it to be real. I always thought religions were stories you learn because they were important cultural stories that had some education value, like the story of Prometheus giving fire to humans, for example. I was working at my uncle's restaurant in California when I saw a man at the bar who was looking pale and seemed to be out of it. His hands were clammy and he was not fully aware. I knew these were symptoms of a heart attack and he was unresponsive, so I called the ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, he seemed embarrassed by all of it. He did not want to go to the hospital. He asked what he would be charged for the ambulance. The paramedics then tried to convince him for about an hour to go to the hospital. He declined over and over again. I offered to drive him home, but he declined that too. This experience really hit home and made me feel for my neighbors in the United States. In Canada, people don't have to make a decision about something like this. The fact that people have to make health decisions and make their own diagnosis, prognostication, and take these kinds of risks made me really feel for people who are uninsured/uncovered. As someone who has had reconstructive labrum surgery, tonsil/adenoid removal, and several other emergency room experiences, I vowed to never complain about the medical service I receive in Canada, regardless of how long I have to wait. I got beat up real bad one time and someone called an ambulance. I tried to refuse, but they talked me into going with them to make sure I didn't have a concussion or internal bleeding. I even tried to talk them out of giving me an MRI or maybe CAT scan once I got there, since I didn't have insurance. The nurses said not to worry about that. Total bills were $7,004. Whole camps of homeless people living under highway overpasses in New Orleans. In New Orleans, those people are referred to as the middle class. I was in the M&M superstore in Times Square, and I saw a woman so fat, just so fat, she used a scooter. That's unfortunately not exceptionally unusual. I'm from Australia, and I couldn't believe how high the water levels are in your toilet. My berries nearly touched the water. Also, you drive through ATMs. Crazy. Yeah, when I went there, I suddenly realized why their toilets overflow when they get clogged. This is a very strange and alien thing to most of us outside the country. Perhaps someone can explain it. A homeless man in Seattle called me a good-for-nothing N-word, word for word. Keep in mind that at the time this happened, I was a 14-year-old white kid with a steadier job than he had. Homeless people are like ghosts in America. Nobody acknowledges them, we are frightened by them, and even sometimes amused. I was at a McDonald's in the US, and no one kicked my ass for wearing my futuristic computer glasses. Because it isn't like Paris. Tax. Why not put a flipping price sticker that includes it, so I don't have to work out if I have enough money for everything? Yes, this is so true. I've had to bust out the calculator in advance for nearly every major transaction. Wouldn't say it would be shocking, but just a tad startling. Basically, flags. Flags everywhere. On the pavements, in the windows, on the side of buildings, up poles, on cars, on doors, on posters, pretty much anything it could be stuck to. Oh, and the real comfy feeling of diners. Genuinely felt welcome in any I went for a cup of tea in. Always got a raised eyebrow and a question when I asked for hot tea instead of iced tea. I'm from Canada too, and I visited Anaheim. Portion sizes were gigantic. I swear they slaughtered 5 chickens for my girlfriend's dish at the Cheesecake Factory. The next morning's breakfast at the hotel was huge too. I felt like I was going to explode after. Also, corn syrup and everything. The ketchup and Coke were thick. Was definitely weird, and I wasn't a big fan of it. Seriously, if you're wondering why you have an obesity problem, this and the last point are part of it. I know obesity is a global issue, but fixing it starts at home. I was also surprised with how friendly and forward people were. Random strangers would talk to us, and staff were nice. Everyone spoke louder than back home too. This wasn't just at Disneyland, but also at small places on Newport. Speaking of Newport, we went to Balboa Island. Just off the island is a huge plastic surgery complex. That was interesting. Oh, and Americans take their schools seriously. Many houses on Balboa had university flags flying, and I saw a lot of UCLA and USC shirts. Oh, and girls breaking into song in the middle of the street? I found this confusing. I wasn't sure whether to find it endearing or cheesy. If anyone did that back home, people would think they're insane. But in America, I saw this multiple times. Holy car! I didn't expect that many responses to this. So to clear some things up that are getting repeated in the comments, I now understand that Canada also has HFCS in many foods. However, I did still find Coke and ketchup sweeter and more syrupy. That's what I meant by thicker. In regards to Cheesecake Factory, we ate there the day we arrived. There's not much choice in local food when you're on the Disneyland resort. Plus, my girlfriend's organization she volunteers for sends the people they help to cheesecake, so there was a bit of meaning to it. Oh, and in regard to schools, that's interesting that it's sports teams. I believe my school, the University of Alberta, has pretty good teams, but no one really cares unless they're directly affiliated with them. They seem more like clubs here, interesting to see the difference there. I'm also leaning towards good in regards to girls singing. Life could always be more like Hairspray. My first visit to America was Detroit. I haven't been back to America since. See, the problem is you went to Detroit. 90% of American citizens are too afraid to visit Detroit. Hey, lay off Detroit. Them people are living in Mad Max times. I was on the West Coast for about 2 months a couple of years ago. I'm from the Netherlands. Things that struck me. Portion sizes. Your small pizza is our large pizza. Your medium pizza is our family pizza. Your large pizza doesn't fit inside our borders. Clean streets. I saw a lot of $1,000 littering fine signs. Must have worked because there wasn't so much as a cigarette butt on the streets. Space! You have a lot of it. Everything is bigger, taller, larger, wider, and further apart. Food is cheaper than in Europe. Alcohol is more expensive. I figured out why you don't see a lot of American cars outside of America. I'll stop here before I insult people. I visited a Giants game in San Francisco and couldn't believe my eyes when Giants and Cardinals fans were sharing a couple of beers and eating hot dogs together while cheering for different teams. In Europe, we have to separate soccer fans from the moment they arrive in the game city until the second they leave, to stop them from bashing each other's heads in. Also, the entertainment value with all the songs and games is much higher than in European sports matches. TLDR, when you're from Europe and visit the USA, it's like somebody puts the contrast on your TV on maximum and turns the volume up. Rich people are richer, poor people are poorer, sweets are sweeter, laws are stricter, sports are more fun, everything is bigger, and man, do you guys build crappy cars. The amount of self-segregation that blacks and whites do in St. Louis, a city whose black-white population is basically 50-50. I almost never saw mixed-race groups of people socializing. It was either all black or all white. The two societies are almost separate. I have been here for 3 months on an internship. Things I have noticed. That whole patriotism and American ideal is dead in the youth. No one believes in the American dream anymore. Every young person I have met has said, yeah, this country kinda sucks, but what can you do? And I am in the South. Also the fact that it seems no one cooks. I prepare my own lunch and make my meals because it's cheaper and healthier. People seemed strange to know that as a 20-year-old male I can cook and choose to. Also, the use of elevators. I have not seen people take the elevator down from the second floor so many times in my life. I'm sure this will all get buried, but the 1 or 2 of you who make it this far, high five! Speaking in terms of Americans I've met, I can say that I have met equal amounts of patriots and the disillusioned amongst the young and old alike. I thought fat people in Taiwan were fat, but then I saw Americans. Almost no Taiwanese are considered fat to me now. I spent a summer in Canada, but we went down to Chicago to go to Lollapalooza. On the way back, our bus had a stopover in Detroit. We left the bus terminal to get some food and passed by a taxi rank. One of the drivers asked, "You boys need a lift?" We politely declined, but he was eager as can be. "What do you want then? Wacky tobacco?" We explained that we were about to cross the border into Canada and didn't want any wacky tobacco, thanks. "White powder?" "No thanks, kind taxi man." "Smack?" I was shocked. Taxi drivers in Ireland are reluctant to even drive anywhere. American taxi drivers are significantly more helpful and seem to provide a much wider range of services. Other shocking things about America include the drinking age being 21. Quite how fat the people manage to get. That's not to say that all Americans are fat, just that those that are fat are really flipping fat. The existence of Four Loko. The people that hold rock and roll will kill your soul signs outside festivals. Heinz ketchup has different ingredients in America and is slightly less nice. It's really hard to narrow it down to one thing, so I'm not going to. The anti-child termination billboards, they horrified me, not in the way they intended. Along the same vein, people handing out anti-child termination propaganda outside a Nine Inch Nails concert. Only stuff I get handed at concerts here is for trashy clubs with their band-themed after-parties. The attitude of servers in restaurants. If someone messed up, the amount of apologies I would get, they were practically begging for my forgiveness, so I didn't leave them without a tip. It was awful. Religious shopping channel programs. There was a nun on TV trying to sell me a figurine of baby Jesus. I've never seen anything like it. US flags everywhere. So many. That level of continual patriotism seems almost redundant when you're smack bang in the middle of the country. Heck, I could easily keep going, but I'll leave it at that. Oh, one more. Americans call the main meal the entree. Mind-boggling. Brazilian here. Everything is so flipping cheap. From food to soda to cars and computers. Everything is a tenth of the flipping international price. And also, gas. When I was in America visiting my folks, the lady with nice hair on CNN was complaining about the gas prices, and I noticed something didn't seem right with the numbers, so I made a few conversions and started laughing. No one in the room got it. 1 liter of gas in America, $1.04. 1 liter of gas in Brazil, $3,017. I've never been to the US, but the most shocking thing I found out about America recently was that it's legal to not only carry a piece around with you for no reason at all, but to carry them openly as if you're flipping Rambo or something. I knew that many Americans own more ordnance than the military, but I just assumed they had to remain inside the house. For home protection, I hear all the time. I didn't realize you can just walk around armed to the teeth. Hey wife, going to McDonald's. Where's my ammunition? I'll come with you. Need to give my 45 a walk. Not trying to start another massive debate or anything, I'm just saying, to my perspective, that is absolutely crazy. In Australia, only the police carry weapons, and even then they are very, very rarely used. The police get in more trouble for shooting people than they would just letting them get away with crimes. Human life is considered very valuable, even criminals. And just to be clear, because the firearms are great, there are laws, replies are already starting, please note that I'm not trying to offend or judge anybody. This is simply my perspective on something that is shocking to me about the United States, as asked by the OP. I'm from New Zealand, visited California a few years ago. While getting a haircut, the lady asked me where I was from. I said, New Zealand. She then proceeded to try guess what state I was in until I told her it was a country. She then refuses to believe that New Zealand is a country, no matter what I told her about my country. That amazed me. Another thing was the guy at the airport asking if we still hunt and eat the Maori. That was asked after he asked whether or not we had indoor plumbing in New Zealand. It was then that I realized most Americans I met were extremely narrow-minded and thought the world outside the US was an undeveloped place totally reliant on their great country. Most people were quite friendly, though. Most shocking thing I saw? Poverty. Absolute poverty. I visited the States 5 times, and each and every time it is impossible not to notice a huge problem with poverty. I'm Irish, so coming to the States I had a high enough standard on how a first world country should be, and it was as sad as it was shocking to notice how badly some people had it. Chicago. Well, I've been in Chicago quite a bit, with O'Hare being the main international airport for me, and it's not the worst, but some of the houses in which I've seen people come out of, and the number of homeless, has left me speechless. I've been in Chicago in the middle of winter, and that stuff is cold. I don't understand how people manage to survive. Washington and New York, they're about on the same level. In the center of these cities you can see the wealth, but venture outside them a little and the striking difference in living conditions is amazing. Just by looking like I had money, I've nearly been mugged twice. Los Angeles. LA was alright, except for the fact that if you get on the tram to venture from the city center out to Long Beach, you pass through some seriously trash-looking neighborhoods. It's scary, actually, that the population of Ireland lives in this small area, and they're so badly off compared to us. Also, lots of homeless, like lots. New Orleans. What the actual flip? I've never met nicer people in my life. Never. But what the actual flipping flip? How can you let people live like that? It's disgraceful. If you just walk outside the normal tourist area, you're into a place with high crime/violence, and you can see why. They have nothing. There's a massive gap between the rich and poor, and you seriously need to do something about it. The fact that America is built for cars and not for people. Excluding the original 13 colonies and some major cities, hello, New York and Boston, San Francisco and Chicago, the United States is built on a scale where the basic unit of measurement is not a human being, but a Ford F-150, at least. The streets are gargantuan, the endless sprawl of buildings is just mind-boggling, and when someone says, "It's only 15 minutes, they mean it's a 15-minute drive on the freeway, and not a 15-minute walk. Everything is car-centered, and without a car you ain't going nowhere. No wonder there is so much drunk driving. There is no other option for the people to get around. The exceptions are the cities that have a working rail-based public transport system. People here can get around like they do in the rest of the world. The scale of the place, the fact that everything is so insanely spread around, makes the entire urban area of the country seem incredibly empty, anonymous, unwelcoming, and just depressing at times. Showed someone who worked in a hotel in Mississippi my passport as a form of identification. She had never seen one before despite working in the hospital industry. I believe her exact words were, "Wow, you've got like a whole book there." Who is someone that we praise but was actually a horrible person? Chris Gardner, the man who Will Smith played in The Pursuit of Happiness, is considered to be an amazing success story, an inspiration, and a great father. He actually cheated on his wife with a dental student and got her pregnant. He then started dating said dental student and reportedly beat her. He was even taken in by police because of a domestic abuse charge. Dr. Seuss was having an affair with a woman while his wife had cancer. His wife killed herself because of it. Charles Dickens dumped his wife of 10 kids and 22 years for an 18-year-old mistress. When she called him out on it, he publicly called her a fat jackass. I'll just repost my answer to a question similar to this that was posted a while back. James Cameron. His movies are great, but he's such a butt. There's a reason why the crews to your movies are constantly revolting against you. He's been married 5 times. His marriage to Linda Hamilton ended after just 8 months because he was caught cheating with Susie Amis, who played Rose's granddaughter in the Titanic. He called agnosticism cowardly atheism. Orson Scott Card described him as selfish and cruel while working on the novelization to The Abyss. After working with Cameron on Titanic, Kate Winslet decided she would not work with him again unless she's earned a lot of money. She said that Cameron is a nightmare to work with. Studios have come to fear his habit of straying way over schedule and over budget. He is notorious on set for his uncompromising and dictatorial manner, as well as his flaming temper. Sam Worthington said Cameron would use a nail gun to nail the crew's cell phones to a wall in retaliation for unwanted ringing during production of Avatar. The first editor of The Terminator got fed up with Cameron and refused to edit the movie to Cameron's specifications. He did it so he could get fired. The crew that worked on Aliens walked off set. The entire crew. They eventually came back after a lengthy negotiation and an apology from Cameron for his conduct. Composer James Horner refused to work with him for 10 years after doing the score to Aliens. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio still refuse to talk about their experience working with him on The Abyss. Some few things that are known is that Cameron ordered the actors to go to the bathroom in their diving suits to save time between takes, and every actor in the movie had major breakdowns at some point during the production of the movie. One of the few things that Harris has said is that he was driving home one day while shooting and spontaneously started crying, and he had to pull to the side of the road until he stopped. Mastrantonio has just said it was a horrible experience. The cast had to relieve their anger by completely destroying their dressing rooms, tossing couches and ripping the walls apart. Cameron has admitted that the only reason why he made the Titanic was to get the studio to finance his dive to the actual ship. He went to the studio, opened a book of Titanic paintings and said, "This ship, Romeo and Juliet." They greenlit the movie on the spot. His reputation is legendary in the business. During the 70th Golden Globe Awards, Amy Poehler joked about the controversy around the depiction of the torture in Zero Dark 30, a film co-produced and directed by Cameron's second wife, Kathryn Bigelow. Poehler said, "When it comes to torture, I trust the lady who spent 3 years married to James Cameron." Wow, I knew that Cameron and the film crew of Aliens didn't get along, but I didn't realize he was the directing equivalent of Edward Norton. Steve Harvey. He was married 3 times and cheated. All 3 times. As a result, he was divorced 3 times. Still writes books on relationships, not to mention his views/lack of understanding of evolution. Abe Lincoln got the nickname Honest Abe because of impartial judgment during cockfights. Okay, so I desperately wanted this to be true, but I've done some research, and this anecdote appears to be one of a number of many small events that might possibly have contributed to the name Honest Abe. Not a single person, but the Kennedy family, especially Ted Kennedy, who had an affair with his secretary, got into a car accident with her while DUI, and then left her to die. He also got expelled from Harvard for academic dishonesty several years before that. I believe that when Ted had the accident that killed the girl, he called his political advisor before calling an ambulance. His old man was a Nazism apologist as well, chose to seek appeasement with the Führer, even though he knew that Jews were being massacred and most of Europe was being flattened. Also refused to allow the US Congress to give aid to the UK to fight Germany, and was later involved in helping fund the IRA. I believe when Ted had the accident that killed the girl, he called his political advisor before calling an ambulance. By current standards, pretty much everyone who lived on the planet before about 1800. Michael Jordan was a bit of an a-hole. Can't knock his game, but you can find a lot of bad stuff about him with a simple Google search if you're interested. A bit? That's an understatement. I've never read a single account of a story that portrays Michael Jordan as a decent person or even just a person who isn't a jerk. Jordan is notorious for being a huge D-bag. Andrew Jackson. From the spoils system to the Trail of Tears, thanks again, Mr. Jackson. Let us honor your achievements by placing you on our $20 bill. Well, the guy hated paper money, so putting him on the $20 bill is a big FU to him. I have one of his violins. It's weird, considering I'm 1/4 Cherokee. My biggest problem with Thomas Edison was the blatant lies he would spread in order to retain a financial monopoly on power generation. He would travel and run demonstrations of why alternating current is dangerous by electrocuting an animal with something like 5,000 volts, claiming that it was 1/4 of the voltage intended to be used to transmit power, in order to scare people into accepting direct current as the only safe form of electrical transmission. Equivalent DC voltage would have been much more destructive, but he always withheld that information. Horrible is a strong word, but any of the Scientology celebrities, I'd have to say. I'm always surprised by who is a part of it. Woody Allen. To this day, my husband refuses to believe that he is scummy.
Oh, come on! What kind of scummy man would marry his daughter?
Flipping Oprah. Oprah is the only reason people ever even started to pay attention to this entire Jenny McCarthy autism vaccines bullpoop. She is the only reason people trust Dr. Phil to give advice. Spoiler alert, he should not be counseling people, and she's the reason my grandma says stuff like, "But Dr. Oz said that if I eat a lot of green coffee and rub acai beans on my face, I'll look 40. Still love you though, Grandma. Oprah has caused a lot of bullpoop. F Oprah. I hate the hip, quirky reputation Bill Murray has managed to get over the past few years. I used to work at a place where he was occasionally a customer. He's kind of a dismissive jerk. He can be exceptionally rude to the people around him. I understand that celebrities want to be left alone in public like everyone else, but he was often unpleasant with the staff, and nobody there acted like a gawky fan with famous people. We had other famous customers, some much more notable and important than him, and we knew not to make celebrities uncomfortable. Stephen Colbert, David Cross, Joe Biden, all lovely and gracious. Bill Murray is just a complete member for the sake of being one. Jimmy Savile. Over here in the UK, he had his own TV show and was a celebrity, until after he died it was revealed that he was fixing more than the children's wishes. I guess it's past tense, being praised, but yeah. Richard Dawkins is simply immature, his charity was stolen from, and he is simply rude. The only reason he is relevant in the mainstream is because he wrote an edgy book. If it wasn't for that, he would have been just another scientist in another lab, written about only in specific journals. Dawkins is brilliant within his field. The man knows a lot about evolution, but he's a condescending, judgmental a-hole when it comes to other folks' faith. I'm an atheist myself, but I can't stand the way Dawkins talks about religious people, and there have been a fair number of allegations of sexism against him as well. The atheist community could do so much better than Dawkins. I can't stand Dawkins. He's so gosh darn smug. If you're going to be a smug anti-theist, at least be a hilarious alcoholic bohemian like Christopher Hitchens. I'm inclined to agree with the people commenting on this. Dawkins may be smart, but they really need to run his commentary through a spin doctor first. I wouldn't say horrible, but Nelson Mandela is given a free ride on a lot of things. I'm going from memory here and on mobile, so I'm sure someone will correct any errors. For starters, he promised South Africa the Freedom Charter, essentially a 1945 UK-style welfare state, whilst simultaneously selling much of the country's industry off to foreign companies. He had written a lot in Robben Island about how the only way South Africa could go forward was by nationalising industry. He essentially promised a welfare state he knew he couldn't provide, and doomed the poorest of the nation. John Pilgar's Freedom Next Time is a fantastic book about this. He argues that in part thanks to Mandela's actions, South Africa became an economic apartheid, which was just as bad for the people in townships than actual apartheid. He also supported Mbeki's assertions that HIV didn't cause AIDS, and that anti-retroviral drugs were a Western conspiracy. The thing is, weighed against the good he did in South Africa, and how much he helped that country heal, perhaps it isn't that significant. It just annoys me that people are completely unwilling to recognize any of these pretty big flaws. I would treat him as a George Washington. He's not a man who lived, he's the father of the nation and gets a lot of passes for that. You need something to center the culture on. He's a myth, not a man. Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin kidnapped a 14-year-old girl. Wow, I never knew this. In 1972, Page was hanging around a nightclub and laid eyes on 14-year-old Laurie Maddox. He liked what he saw and didn't give a flip that she was underage by, well, a lot. Why should he, after all? The club clearly didn't. As the young, handsome lead guitarist in the biggest rock band in the world, Page was probably very shy and awkward around girls. So, instead he sent roadie Richard Cole to Maddox's table with the message, "Jimmy told me that he's going to have you whether you like it or not." The roadie then grabbed her and chucked her in the back of the limo, saying, "You effing move and I'll effing have your head." From there, they drove back to Page's house, where he and Maddox proceeded to have lots and lots of dirty, unspeakable acts. Of course, Page knew this was incredibly wrong, and if word got out, he was screwed. So he did the only responsible thing he could think of. For 3 long years, Maddox was for the most part kept behind closed doors, so the relationship with Page wasn't discovered and he wouldn't end up in jail. King Arthur. Dude ain't even real. John Wayne. I believe in white supremacy, at least to a point where African Americans are responsibly educated. He was also an aggressive drunk and a draft dodger despite playing heroic roles. Pablo Picasso, genius artist though he undeniably was, treated the people in his life like trash. Affairs on top of affairs. He drove his first wife into a mental breakdown and literally turned their only son into Picasso's chauffeur. He had a child with his first mistress, who he played mind games with on a daily basis for the rest of her life. After he died, she killed herself. His second mistress, he drove into a mental breakdown. His third, he physically abused. He did have 2 children with her, who he refused to legally acknowledge for years. And his second and final wife, treated like a doormat, who also ended up killing herself after he died. Oh, and after he died, his second wife barred all of his previous family from his funeral, including his grandson, who was so distraught by this, he killed himself too. Amazing, amazing artist, but totally effing sadistic in how he treated the people around him. Oliver Cromwell is massively praised and admired in Britain, often making it into lists of the top 10 greatest Britons in British history. Meanwhile, he is universally vilified in Ireland and regularly makes it into lists of the top 10 greatest villains in Irish history. I find it quite amazing that the British ignore his genocidal campaigns in Ireland and prefer to erect massive statues of him outside their parliament instead. I mean, I know I'm supposed to praise dear leader, but Kim Jong-un is kind of a d-hole. Arnold Schwarzenegger, illegitimate child with the maid working in his house, reduced the sentence of a convicted murderer for a political friend, signed into law the biggest tax increase in California ever whilst campaigning for lower taxes, and an overall disgusting political weasel. And yet, still one of the more respectable figures in the modern GOP. Jebediah Springfield, aka Hans Sprungfeld. Ronald Reagan was probably involved in the Iran-Contra affair and dealing with Iran before the election against Carter. Republican ties let Iran know they'd get a better deal if they waited until after the election was decided to release the hostages, after which Reagan's staff sold them weapons for gold, which was then funneled into South American right-wing terrorist organizations that killed thousands of people in cold blood. That and his economic policies have led to a lot of the crap we are dealing with today. Mother Teresa. She said that people needed to suffer to be closer to God and would deny medical care to people under her care, so they would suffer and die. One case that changed my opinion was a teenage boy who had a kidney problem easily fixed by surgery, but the nuns of the order refused to allow him to be taken, and instead just gave him aspirin and waited for him to die. She also diverted a lot of the money donated meant for helping poor people towards extreme pro-life positions, including stopping legal contraception. John Lennon. Not only was his talent blown out of proportion, Imagine is probably the most overrated song of all time, and unintelligent, he was clueless about social issues, he was a pretty horrible person in general. He would beat his family and verbally abuse his son, Julian, who stated publicly that Paul was more of a father to him. On one occasion, Julian was laughing, and John yelled, "I hate the way you effing laugh," and sent him away. There is a long list of horrible things he has done. Winston Churchill wanted to start World War III against Russia the moment Germany was divided up. Oh, and William Wallace. After the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he skinned one of the English lords and made a belt out of his skin. Even for the time, it was needlessly barbaric. Steve Jobs. Misogynist, all but abandoned his daughter for years, a-hole to most people he met, most Appleites will tell you that he sucked as a boss, and that Tim Cook is far better. He deserved to get fired by his own company, as he did early on. Marlon Brando showed up to Apocalypse Now 50 pounds overweight and didn't know a single word of his lines, which is the reason he appears in shadows the whole movie. He's also notorious for being extremely difficult to work with on sets, often never memorizing his lines and having cue cards. The fact that he didn't prepare for roles and was reading cue cards makes his acting even more impressive. Snoop Dogg or Lion or whatever the flip his name is now. People seem to forget that he actually murdered someone but got away with it, but everyone praises him as a chill dude who smokes herb and advocates for legalization. Isaac Newton. Seems like he went out of his way to demolish Leibniz for having independently developed calculus. Christopher Columbus was a horrible human being who pioneered the sex human traffic trade in the Americas using 9 to 10-year-old girls. He was also wildly racist toward the Lucayan natives of the West Indies and once said, "I could conquer the whole lot of them with 50 men and govern them as I pleased." Yet he is honored in the same way Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln are, with a holiday thanks to the Knights of Columbus, a 20th century all-male Catholic group who lobbied Roosevelt for a Catholic role model for boys to look up to. J.D. Rockefeller was a huge piece of poo who tried to cover it by donating a huge chunk of his fortune to universities and medical research. Really though, he was an a-hole. He rigged up explosives in mines and blew them up to send his miners running. The ones that made it up to the surface were then shot as they ran out of the mines. Of course, Rockefeller denied that he had anything to do with it. Jerry Lewis, the telethon guy. He reaped all this goodwill while taking advantage of children with disabilities, using them for his tearjerker broadcasts. He has made awful public comments like that people with MD are living as half a person, and has called people cripples, and reacted poorly to people criticizing the way he strips disabled people of their dignity. The telethon has refused to make their financial records available and account for where all their donations go. Jeremy Clarkson. Venerated by many Redditors, yet he possesses many of the qualities that would make most people here label anyone who had those qualities an industrial-strength D-bag and a-hole. Uses racist language, makes offensive comments, cheats on his wife, punches a co-worker because he doesn't like the food he's given his co-worker a mouthful of abuse for no good reason, then laughs about it because he thinks he has a guaranteed fan base that will turn a blind eye to his scumbaggery. Also, he knows whatever he does, he is financially bulletproof. If the BBC kick him out, another network will pay a fortune to have him on their books. That last bit aged really well. It seems that a few people here have only ever learned about Guy Fawkes from V for Vendetta. So here's a reason to toss out your Hot Topic mask, in addition to the whole sweatshop labor thing. Dude was a religious zealot. The entire goal was to get rid of those danged Protestants. He didn't want to blow up Parliament while being the first person to scream "anarchy in the UK." He had a very clear idea of the government that he wanted to replace the current one with. The group of conspirators were kinda basically the Catholic version of religion-based terrorist cell. Additional fun facts that don't contribute to him being a jerk. He was just the guy who got caught, since he was the one in charge of setting the fuse. He changed his name to Guido when he was in Spain trying to muster up help to dismantle the Protestant powers in England. Che Guevara, who helped Fidel Castro overthrow the Cuban government and has since become the poster boy for revolution. Anyone who spoke against the revolution was taken by his guerrilla, murdered and buried. They would then return the burial address to their widows. Frank Lloyd Wright. There are many stories of him not paying people and how much of an ass he was because of his ego. He told his boss, Sullivan, to give him a 5-year contract and enough money for a house which he built on the outskirts of Chicago, and then started designing homes behind Sullivan's back for wealthy clients. He left his first wife and 6 kids for a client's wife, and they went to Europe for a year. He came back, got money from his mom, and settled in Wisconsin. It was there that a servant set the house/studio on fire and murdered Wright's second wife, her 2 children, and 4 others. Wright married again, but she was addicted to morphine and was divorced after a year or so. Despite charging high-end clients a lot of money, he was always short on money because he brought a lot of art, which was destroyed in the fires at his home/studio. There are also stories of him being rude to clients and telling them to stick it. Amazing architect, though. Probably anyone before 1960 we praise was damn near absolutely a racist. Plenty after too, for that matter. It's a hard question because of moral relativity. Is it okay to judge past people by modern standards? Furthermore, as Lord Atton said, paraphrased, great men are almost always bad men. Great men like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan were undoubtedly genocidal by today's standard. Also, the question of what constitutes bad. Gandhi was a racist. Mother Teresa espoused Catholic doctrine and taught the poor complacency while bringing in money for the church that could have better been spent to improve the lives of those she purported to help. Martin Luther King Jr. cheated on his wife. Short answer, all of them. Great and good people are still only human. They all had flaws. Doctors who have given a second opinion diagnosis. What is the worst first opinion you've ever encountered? I'm a surgeon. Most patients come to me after having seen another physician who has diagnosed them with something and told the patient to see a surgeon. I've been called to see more than one patient for appendicitis who has already had an appendectomy. I've also been called in multiple cases for patients who very obviously have previously undiscovered very advanced cancer. It's always too far advanced for me to be of help, so I have to wonder, am I being called so I can be the bad guy and explain everything? Yes. The answer is yes. This is the opposite answer, but the best request for a second opinion came from a CVS Minute Clinic. Young, healthy law student goes to Minute Clinic. Has the flu, this was a few years ago, no Rona, feels awful. They check him out, yup, he has a fever, aches, sore throat, it's the flu, flu swab positive. His clinic vitals were notable for a heart rate of 140, a bit high, but not crazy high. Reassuring numbers are under 100. The guy otherwise walks into the CVS and is a healthy young guy. Would have been pretty easy to dismiss it. Anyway, the Minute Clinic says go to the ER, you need an EKG. So the guy follows orders. ER chief complaint is, I have the flu and CVS told me to come here. ER gets an EKG and he's in slow VT, which is a life-threatening arrhythmia that you have to be shocked out of. They take a look at his heart and it was giant and barely moving. He had an insane myocarditis. Dude ended up getting cannulated for ECMO within hours, cardiac bypass machines as life support. I can't say all Minutes clinics are the same, but holy crap, that was a great save. I'm a gynecologist. The number of times I've seen patients pregnant and upset or happy because some other doctor told them they can't get pregnant, so they didn't use birth control, is appalling. Usually, it's family med. Not ragging on all FM docs, just how it goes. I then have to explain that even if the patient has whatever condition that makes it unlikely for them to get pregnant, the odds are almost never 0%. Maybe less than 1%, but still not a zero, so of course it can happen. Well, when I first started feeling sick on the October of one year at college, I had a non-productive cough, night sweats and trouble sleeping, and I lost some weight. The school nurse gave me Claritin. All of those symptoms got worse, plus I was incredibly fatigued, my lymph nodes swelled up, and I had pretty bad backaches. My GP took a chest x-ray and prescribed antibiotics for pneumonia. At this point, I had almost failed out of school because I was only managing an hour or two of sleep per night. It took until spring break for me to go see a pulmonary specialist. He could instantly tell that it wasn't pneumonia. I had stage 4B Hodgkin's lymphoma. My first PET scan showed cancerous cells and lymph nodes in all 4 quadrants of my body. At this rate, I had lost about a third of my body weight. The cough, weight loss, and back pain were my swollen lymph nodes pressing on my lungs, stomach, and my back. They gave me my first round of chemo, and I felt genuinely incredible. I felt like such crap that an IV mix of carefully measured toxins was an improvement. I went home and ate a whole pizza. Chemo got crappier, but it worked, so I guess I can't complain too much. I'm a lawyer, but had a client given a devastating diagnosis of an extremely rare heart condition. Doctor told him he had 6 weeks to live. He contacted me to make his will and set his affairs in order. Thankfully, he sought a second opinion with an extremely well-known cardiologist. I guess the cardiologist was intrigued due to the rare nature of the heart condition. There was nothing wrong with him. He was fine. This poor guy and his family were tortured over this, so devastated and terrified, for nothing. He actually called me to tell all of this. He seemed to still be in a joyous, I'm not going to die stage, but I imagine anger comes at some point when you take stock of what you went through. I don't know how a doctor flips up that massively, or if somehow my client's results were mixed up with someone else's. And some poor fellow's number is almost up and they don't even know it. Patient. When I was in college, I went to the doctor because I was peeing razors. It progressed pretty rapidly, and by the end of the week, I couldn't walk or sleep. The doctor asked me about my romantic life, and I told him the truth that my girlfriend and I had only been with each other and together for many years. He sort of scoffed at that and told me it was likely chlamydia. He had a long condescending speech about safe, fun times with me and then sent me home. A week later, my pee tests were back. Turns out I had the worst bladder infection they'd ever seen. I had to have a camera shoved up my pee hole, multiple rounds of antibiotics, and to this day I struggled to pee due to irreversible damage in the infection caused. I don't know about you listeners, but the story made the narrator feel sympathy pain in his nether regions. I have one that happened to me. I did college gymnastics. My senior year I had an accident in practice landing on my neck. Went to the hospital, got x-rays, was told I was perfectly fine. Walked around in pain for a while. Weeks later went to another doc, got a new set of images. My neck was broken in 3 places and had a dislocation. Had a multi-level fusion surgery days later. Found out my x-rays got swapped with someone else's in the ER, and I was originally diagnosed based on someone else's images. This was found out when I went to get my recordings long after my surgery for insurance purposes, and had my files and someone else's medical records and images in it. Because of the time I spent walking around with it, I have had a posterior surgery instead of anterior, which is way more invasive and gives me major issues to this day. Not a doctor. My husband had a situation where he almost died because of misdiagnosis. To preface this, at the time, we were young in our mid-20s, living in a college town. My husband had horrible pain, on floor, on hands and knees, horrible. We went to the ER and the doctor barely looked at him and just told him to stop drinking and it would be fine. We go home, the pain is getting worse and now he is vomiting. As soon as the doctor's office opens back home, where we grew up, we drove 1.5 hours to see our primary care. Within 15 minutes of walking into the GP office, my husband was rushed to emergency surgery. His gallbladder had almost completely ruptured and he was going septic. It was a total mess and he almost died because of a misdiagnosis. Obligatory, I am not the doctor, but the patient. I went to a sleep doctor because I was constantly tired and falling asleep standing up and such. Serious stuff. Doctor was like, well, you're overweight, so it's definitely sleep apnea. I did a sleep study, came back negative for sleep apnea. Doctor was like, well, I'm still positive it's sleep apnea because you're a porker. So he sent me home with a CPAP machine for a month. After a month of using the machine, which records your sleep apnea events every night, and still said I didn't have sleep apnea, and with me having zero improvement in my symptoms, I went back to him and he said, well, if this isn't working, I can't help you, because you obviously have sleep apnea, since all tubbos have sleep apnea, so you must not be using the CPAP. So I dropped him like a fresh turf and went to get a second opinion. New sleep doc, new sleep study. Came back and the new doctor says, yeah, this is textbook narcolepsy. You have all the symptoms and the sleep study proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I told him about the other doctor and he said, this is obviously narcolepsy. Your previous doctor was a moron. And unlike the other quotes in this story, this is an actual direct quote. I'll never forget the look of disgust on his face when he said the word moron. Not a doctor, but my sister was suffering from headaches and minor seizures for a while. Went to an urgent care and they told us that she had an anxiety disorder and just needed something to calm her down. We got a second opinion at the ER and turns out she had stage 4 brain cancer. I miss her every day. Wow, we trust doctors for so much and I'm sure that they're doing their best with the time they have. But stories like this, consider a second opinion sometimes, folks. I just left a practice partly because a woman brought her 8-month-old in for a second opinion. The practice owner had seen the rapidly enlarging sacral soft tissue mass, which the mother first noticed about 6 weeks prior. He told her not to worry about it. I checked his notes, which read, plan, ignore. I was shocked. There was a new onset rapidly enlarging blue-purple cystic mass on the baby's sacrum. It looked like a small plum under the skin at the top of her bum crack. And without any investigation, my colleague dismissed it. I was appalled. The mother was relieved. This wasn't the first not great judgment I've seen, but it was one of the worst. I realized I couldn't work in a clinic where I'd be stepping on other doctors' toes and couldn't trust their judgment. The babies had an imaging and a referral to a pediatric surgeon, but unfortunately I don't know the outcome because I'm working elsewhere now. Obligatory, I'm not a doctor, but when I had my wisdom teeth out, it was pretty brutal. Like they had to put me completely under, dig deep into my jawbone, the teeth were coming in sideways and upside down, just like the worst case scenario. So I have the surgery and the next couple of days I'm in a lot of pain, which happens. And I realize I have this growing hot lump on the side of my jawbone. Me being a dumbass, I tried to be like, oh, it'll go away. But it didn't, and my mum caught sight of it, and took me back to the guy who did my surgery. Dentist dude took an x-ray and without even examining it or asking any questions first, said I was fine and it was probably just scar tissue and told me to leave. I thought, hey, well, he's smarter than me, so I guess he's right. My mother, however, did not think this. And so off we go for a second opinion, and while we're headed over to the other office, the hard lump in my jaw bursts and blood and pus leaks everywhere in my mouth. It was so effing gross. My mum immediately turned around, drove back to the dental surgeon, dragged me, who was still spitting blood and pus, barged into the office and made the dental surgeon look in my mouth. The dental surgeon muttered something about hysterical women seeing things that weren't there, but prescribed me antibiotics and more pain meds anyway. And that was how the 1 to 2 week recovery took an entire month and I ended up having to drop out of a college course due to missing so much. I tasted this story. My uncle-in-law went to multiple doctors about leg pain and trouble walking. He's a big guy and every doctor told him in more or less condescending ways that his issue was that he needed to lose weight. After 5 years, he finally got someone to MRI him and it turned out he had a, by then, grapefruit-sized tumor in his leg. He unfortunately died about 6 months later because it metastasized. Yeah, being overweight is unhealthy, but seriously, F all those doctors that wouldn't believe he was in pain and just saw a fat person. Not a doctor, it was my doctor. I was a child and had a lot of trouble with abdominal pain. Mum kept taking me to the doctors, and he kept minimizing it, saying there was nothing wrong. Went on for a long time until I was doubled over in pain outside school one day. Mum asked me if it was hurting, and I told her it always hurt, and I just told her when it was really bad. She took me straight to my doctor's surgery and demanded I got looked into further, figuring a 5-year-old child shouldn't be living in constant pain. A few scans later, and I was immediately whisked into surgery. My mum still can't think of me being wheeled into the theatre when her and the doctors did not even actually know what exactly was wrong and what they were going to do. The plan was to open me up, figure out the exact issue, and go from there. I had an extra growth on my kidney, which was all infected, an extra ureter that was infected the whole way along. The doctor who had continually fobbed my mum off as a panicking parent whose child has nothing wrong with them actually ended up making a house visit to apologize. I went to the ER for some crazy stomach pain, and the doc there said it was because my thyroid was super inflamed. The thing is, I don't have a thyroid. I was born without one, and I take meds every day because of this. I tell her this, and she says, "No, that can't be true. Your thyroid is enormous," and sent me to do an ultrasound. Lo and behold, it's not there. She refused to believe this and asked my primary doctor to explain my seemingly crazy anatomy. He goes, "Yeah, he doesn't have a thyroid." Turns out what she thought she saw was actually my Adam's apple, which I guess is sorta big. I had a period of about a year where I was getting constant UTIs, which is apparently, as a woman in her 20s, is normally caused by not peeing after doing it. I'm still not sure what was causing mine, but I was not active in the bedroom at all due to vaginismus. My doctor was away for school holidays and stupidly I thought I could last a week until she was back. Nope, 2 days later I could barely move from the couch in pain, so I called a doctor. This doctor, a home doctor because it was a public holiday, refused to hand over the script until I acknowledged that I was being sexually irresponsible. When I said, "I am a virgin," embarrassing and potentially dangerous statement to make with a strange man in my house while I was home alone, this jackass laughed his ass off and said, "No, you're not. Nobody is at this age. Stop pretending to be all innocent." Slammed the prescription on my coffee table and walked out, refusing to give me the starter dose that they're required to carry, for people like me who are alone and can't get the prescription until the first dose kicks in enough to begin helping. I called the office to complain, and he did get reprimanded. But holy heck was I embarrassed. Not a doctor. My grandmother fell from her horse one day. Not a terrible fall, but from the way she landed, she wanted to get checked out. She felt she had really jolted her spine and neck, and was an older lady with fragile bones. Her doctor looked things over, gave her one of those soft neck cushion things, and sent her home. A couple days later, she decided to get a second opinion. No real reason, she just hadn't felt listened to by the first guy. The second doctor basically took one look at her x-rays and freaked out. He told her they needed to get her immediately into a brace to immobilize her spine. I googled to try and figure out what it was. I think it was a halo brace, but in my memory it's bigger and more metal than what I was seeing in the pictures. Basically, she had broken her neck, the same injury that paralyzed Christopher Reeve, but she wasn't paralyzed because the vertebrae hadn't dislocated. The second doctor said anything that did dislocate it, another minor fall, twisting wrong in bed, would mean being permanently paralyzed from the neck down. She wore her intense metal brace that kept her spine in place for a few months, and was totally fine. She lived another 15 years after that. But I think about that story often. The second doctor saved her mobility and freedom. Not a doctor, but I second opinioned the doctor I had for 2 years in high school. He diagnosed me, gave me the medical certificates and drugs for pleurisy, twice, glandular fever, shingles, tonsillitis, despite no tonsils, and malaria. 5 different diseases within 2 years for an otherwise healthy 16-year-old girl. My teachers would read these medical certificates and go, 2 weeks off for malaria? Just after you recovered from your bout of glandular fever too? Very unfortunate. Clearly not buying a word of it. It was ridiculous. I specifically remember with the shingles one telling him that I have psoriasis, I've had for years, and I think it just popped up randomly on my ribs. He said, "No, it's shingles, and it's quite rare for a young person like yourself to contract it." But he gave me 2 weeks off, so I didn't try to fight it too hard. Dude clearly just found a medical license on the street and claimed it as his own. She's depressed because of work. No, Mom, she has schizophrenia. She has borderline personality disorder. Did you mean she is female and insisting there is something wrong with her when you want to write her off? Also, what she has is a brain tumor, so thanks for playing, but goodbye. He has anxiety. He has OCD, and I'm not sure how you missed it. It's not subtle. He just took some bad acid. Urine tests say no, and patient says he doesn't do drugs. And I get he's a teenager, but unless he took acid 4 months ago while never being alone in the house because of lockdown, and it's only affecting him now by pixie magic, I guess, then I think what he has is psychosis, and I would like to admit him, please and thank you. Also, an infinite array of prisoners diagnosed as officers as making it up, when the answer was serious mental illness, but there's a reason I got the flip out of that job. I get the feeling that this is a prison care worker of some sort, they didn't mention it in the post. Nurse here. I cared for a woman who had been diagnosed with broken vertebrae. She was in a lot of pain, couldn't get her pain under control, and her blood pressure was very low. She'd lose consciousness and be very difficult to wake. I also couldn't get her doctor to answer the phone middle of the night. Something just felt off about the whole situation. He finally answered and demanded that we Narcan her, insisting we'd overdosed her on narcotics, following his orders. I then had a hysterical woman in a lot of pain, going in and out of consciousness. I finally walked down to the entrance of the hospital and grabbed the cardiologist, who came in at 4:30 a.m. for rounds, and said, "This isn't your patient, but I think he's going to die." He came upstairs with me, looked at her and her chart, grabbed the bed and rolled her to ICU himself. I have no idea how the conversation went between the cardiologist and her doctor. She didn't have a broken back, she had an aortic aneurysm, which caused the pain and the low pressure and the loss of consciousness. She died the next day. Doctors, if the nurse says something is wrong, you might want to lay your eyes on the patient rather than shouting orders through the phone. Oh, I have one. Not a doctor, but watch the biggest flip-ups ever. So, my sister is very tall, very thin, and very fit. She was in pre-season for her WNBL season, running medium distances. She had a sudden sharp pain in the left side of her chest, radiating arm pain and shortness of breath. She called an ambulance and was rushed to hospital. They did all the tests with the beep-beep machines and determined no heart attack, said she tore a muscle and sent her home. Welp, a week later she's still in pain and she swears she hears a hissing sound in her chest. She sees our GP. He listens to the chest, has her breathe in and out, goes, "You've torn your lung." She's a perfect candidate for a torn lung, tall, thin, fit. The GP was amazed the hospital didn't hear the tear. How do you miss a torn lung in the perfect candidate for a torn lung? I am a doctor, just not the right kind. When I was 20 or so, I started feeling dizzy, disorientated, tired all the time like I could never get enough sleep. My male family doctor literally patted me on the head and said I was just a type A young lady, and the problem was my monthlies gave me anxiety. Yeah, no, turns out I have a brain malformation that gives me epilepsy and associated narcoleptic episodes. He's since retired, unrelated, but he should have years ago. My coworker went to a free walk-in clinic once because he wasn't feeling really well. The doctor told him he either had a really bad cold or AIDS. Actual doctor here. Someone came in with a diagnosis of toxic shock syndrome by their nurse practitioner, was sent to the ER, lights and sirens. The NP called ahead to say how sick this kiddo was. Kid shows up, it's scabies. Like it was actually flipping scabies. Not even close to toxic shock syndrome. I literally sent the kid home within 30 minutes of them arriving. Yes, I did call the NP back and educated her on what toxic shock syndrome actually was, and what can cause it. The girl wasn't even asked if she used tampons. She didn't. I told the parents to switch to a different provider, preferably an MD/DO. What's the most embarrassing thing a parent has done to you? For those who didn't grow up in a time where you shared a phone with multiple extensions with your parents, consider yourselves lucky. For those who did, me. Hi, it's Kerry. I was wondering if you were going to the mall tomorrow. Girl I liked.
Yeah, I think so. It's Saturday, so I usually go with my friends.
Me. Well, if you're there, do you want to, meet up somewhere and have lunch? Girl.
Yeah, that sounds good. Where do you want to go?
Well, I was thinking... There's a click, some numbers dialing. Mum.
Hello?
Me, yelling upstairs.
Mom, I'm on the phone!
Mum, through the phone.
Carrie, are you on the phone? I was calling my friend Reva. She's having some people over tomorrow, and I wanted to know if she wanted any potato salad.
Me, yelling upstairs.
Mom, I'm on the phone with Susie. Get off!
Mom.
If you want, I can make a little extra so you can take it to judo. I know how you get tired after class. Oh, I hope I get to go this week. You look so handsome in your judo outfit.
Click. Me.
Sorry, Mom can be so embarrassing.
Mom.
I don't think she's there anymore, honey.
My dad was worse. I distinctly remember having a conversation with my best friends over the phone about a boy I liked, and my dad just chimed in with, "Oh, who's Jackson?" because he'd been listening on the other line the whole time. Had my first boyfriend in middle school and brought him home one time. At one point, my mum made him bring me my clean laundry. And by that, I mean a single pair of pink High School Musical underwear. I cried from embarrassment, but he was actually pretty cool about it and comforted me. Then, he cheated on me. My dad, influenced partly by Bad Boys 2, decided to mess with my boyfriend on my first date by acting like a real hard man. He filled a whiskey bottle with tea. Then, when he answered the door, he chugged the whole thing while staring my boyfriend down, then tried to break the bottle over his own head. The date was cancelled due to the hospital trip, and I became known as the girl with the bat crap insane father. "Don't concuss yourself this time" became the running joke once I was able to get a date again. That's incredible, and I want to know whether the father knew the risk involved or was just actually stupid enough to try and emulate something he'd seen on TV. I want to know what the hospital people said. I know when my partner had an oral allergic reaction to my rats and his face started swelling up like those pics of dogs that ate bees, the health center staff was highly entertained. My butt was sitting there in the waiting room like, yes, he understands allergies. Yes, he knew he was allergic to them. Yes, he insisted on petting them. Yes, he had an oral allergic reaction to them because he was feeding them tiny pieces of gummy bear by pinching pieces off, then ate the rest of the gummy bear. Yes, I am questioning my assertion that he's very smart. When I was a senior in college, I was working a part-time job. They offered to make my current position full-time once I graduated. Before I got a chance to respond, my father found out and contacted my supervisor expressing concerns about the offer and the fact that I was still in college. How my father found out still boggles my mind, but when my supervisor told me that my dad called him, that was probably the most embarrassing thing either of my parents have ever done. I spoke to my parents a few months after it happened, and the only thing they considered wrong with the situation was that my supervisor told me my dad had called. Another story for your entertainment, when I was in 7th grade and went to a youth conference with my church. All the students got a free t-shirt and people were signing each other's names on them. This one girl signed mine, dotted the I with a heart, and left her number. Well, I get home, my mum is doing my laundry and finds said number. Yep, you guessed it, my mother called the number and told the girl I needed to focus on my education and didn't have time for girls. After I submitted a job application to a manager when I was 16, my mother barged up and started going on and on about how I was really shy and not much of a people person. Yeah, that's what a manager wants to hear about an applicant for a customer service job. What the frick was she planning on doing? I don't see how anyone could think that was a good idea at all. When I was 8, yes, 8 years old, I was obsessed with the new Charlie's Angels movies with Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu, and Drew Barrymore. There's a scene in the movie where Drew is dressed in a patriotic jumpsuit at the NASCAR racetrack, and I really wanted to have that outfit for my Halloween costume. My mum is a costumer, and God bless her, made my costume from scratch to resemble Drew's jumpsuit. Well, as you can imagine, an 8-year-old girl does not have the cleavage to fill that jumpsuit out, so my mother decided to add a massive fake chest to this costume. I was mortified, and for some reason she could not take them out. So for Halloween that year, I had my arms crossed all of trick-or-treating. I still look back at the pictures from that year with deep anxiety. She Googles my boss's number, called him in his office, and asked him to put me on the phone. In his office. I was in a meeting with a client. I didn't answer her call on my cell phone in the middle of a workday. She wanted to gripe about my stepfather and wanted to talk now. No emergency or anything, she just wanted to talk and gave zero craps about the consequences of her actions, as per fricking usual. And that's the day my boss and pretty much the entire company lost respect for me, when the mum of their co-worker called him on his boss's office to talk about personal crap. A few months later, I resigned. There was nowhere to go in that place anymore. My mom did this to me when I was 18. She turned up at my job on my day off and talked to my boss about all her personal problems while being really clingy and trying to win his approval and start dating. I was on probation and the manager had no time for that crap, so I got a call to not come back. I had no idea that it had happened at the time, and it wasn't until a few weeks into looking for work that she decided to tell me about it. She had always done embarrassing crap like that my whole life, but that's when I realized she would mess up my chances at my livelihood and a decent career. So I never let her find out where I worked ever again. Not the name or anything that could be used to track it down. I wouldn't even tell my relatives specifics if I thought they might let it slip to her. I also didn't live with her, so she couldn't read my mail or pay stubs either. Is anyone else getting baffled at apparently how common it is for mums to completely ruin their children's ability to obtain and keep jobs? I can't believe that any of these people lacked the social intelligence to work out that it could only go negatively. Maybe not the most embarrassing, but certainly top 10. My mum went through this phase where she would talk during movies, specifically about what's going on in the movie. She was also terrible at paying attention to what was going on, so oftentimes what she was explaining was incorrect. In addition, she would try to talk over the movie. Mum would occasionally have to yell to make sure she was heard over the action scenes. Imagine, if you will, watching the aftermath of the stampede scene from The Lion King and the person next to you yelling, "Simba is sad because her dad died." My late mom got worse and worse about this as she got older, chatting through church services, movies, TV shows, using a loud voice in the otherwise quiet environments like public transportation, etc. Like, did part of that etiquette fall out of your brain at some point? You taught 2 kids how to act right, and now you're off the hook? My sister's college graduation, my dad, my now husband, and I all ignored her, so she proceeded to talk everyone around us through the entire ceremony. Not horrible compared to a lot of these, but ugh. Unfortunately, this isn't a fun story. When I was 16, I had a big birthday party at our house. It was wonderful. I got to invite close to 30 friends, including new people from school. My dad made sure to have my favorite chocolate mousse cake as dessert. It turned into just a bunch of teenagers having a great time and talking. Then my mum was suddenly drunk. We never even noticed her drinking. She began microwaving slices of cheese on a paper plate and eating it with her fingers. Most of the kids didn't notice except for my BFF, who had some prior knowledge of her addiction. Kids began leaving, but not before my mum then began asking one of my friends, who was 15, about her intimate life and whether she was doing one of the other boys at the party. I thought I would die while standing and watching it happen. I had a male friend come over after school, and my best friend/neighbor was going to join soon after. They were dating at the time. Anyway, we get off the bus, started walking down the alleyway, and noticed my mum pulling out of the driveway. So we walked up to the car, and I asked where she's going. "Mum, we're heading to the grocery store. Do you need anything?" Me? No, I think I'm good, Mum." "Okay, well, I noticed the cucumber in your room was looking a bit soft, so I'll grab you another one." My friend looked like he was actually about to pee himself. "Was there an actual cucumber, or was she just messing with you?" Oh, she was definitely just fricking with me, but she did come home with a cucumber. I'm 21, and my mum still tries to order my steak for me. I ask for medium rare, and she says, "No, he'll have medium." And I say, "No, medium rare." And she goes, "Okay, whatever, that's fine." My 350-pound mother streaked in front of my boyfriend and my friends for $100. I was only 16, and that image still haunts me. My butthole of a stepdad thought it'd be funny to give my alcoholic mother money to mortify me. When I was 10 or so, I was struggling with being too big for kids' clothes and too skinny for most juniors' clothes. I was trying on this dress with a mesh area around the neck in the department store dressing room, and it was so big on me that my bosom literally showed through the mesh part that was supposed to be around my collarbones. Kids that age are moody, so I just lost it in frustration and started crying. My mom was like, "Oh, just let me see." But I didn't want her to see because that meant showing the whole fitting area, my whole chest. Finally, I showed her, and when she saw how upset I was, instead of comforting me, she decided to mimic me, fake crying in my voice and saying, "Oh my God, everyone can see my chest," and flashed everyone in the dressing room. Jeepers creepers, I came here for dad jokes and funny cringe moments, not actual childhood traumas. This kind of stuff will mess you up for a long time. Well, since we're committed now, here's another one. Sorry, this is a long one, but this will always stick with me until the day I die. So I really liked this one girl in high school, and I was always hoping we would talk someday, but I was a shy and quiet person. So one day we were all waiting around in the hall, and she started going off about her ex-boyfriend and stuff, and I was just there listening and watching. She looks at me and randomly says, "Hey, will you be my boyfriend?" My butt clenched so tight, but I was able to smoothly say, "Sure, why not?" And she just laughed and said okay. So later in the day, I somehow gained the courage to ask her for a number since I'm her new BF, and she smiled and said she wasn't being serious, but would actually like to talk to me. She says she's been wanting to, but I just never asked. Holy crap, my mind was going absolutely insane around this time, so I took her number and walked away without saying anything, because I'm me and will say some stupid crap to screw this up. Fast forward to that night, I'm at home and was going to grab the telephone to give her a call, and my mum asked what I'm doing. I let her know I was calling a friend to talk for a few minutes, but she just said no. Didn't give me a reason, just said no and took the phone back. Now, my mum was going through bad menopause at the time, so she was really mean, unstable, and emotional person for most of my teenage years. Anyway, I asked her about it and she said, I'm not allowed to talk on the phone, but I wasn't in trouble, just wasn't allowed on it. So I did what any teenager does and waited until she fell asleep to go get the phone. So I give her a call and she says she's happy to hear from me and that we can finally talk without our friends bothering us. We talk about the teachers, friends, our schedules, and her general life, etc. I'm really just agreeing and laughing at this point because I'm in utter shock that I'm actually speaking with her. Well, I'm guessing my voice or laughter carried over to my mum's room, and she bursts through the door so hard that I jump and drop the phone. Loud as any person can be, "Why the frick are you on the phone? I told your stupid butt you can't use the phone! Why are you on the fricking phone?" I was not expecting that outburst at all, so I just said I was talking to a friend and asking them for help with homework. She says, "I don't give a crap. I told you not to be on the phone and now you're talking with your friends? Who the frick are you talking to so gosh damn late?" For some dumb reason, I gave her the girl's name and not like another male friend's. She was pretty much turning red at this point. "You don't listen to me and now you're on the phone with some B-word? I don't want no B-word calling our house. Hang up right now and tell that B-word don't ever call here again." She slams the door shut, and I look down to see that the phone is still connected. My heart dropped. She had heard the whole fricking thing. So I pick up the phone and sheepishly say, "Hello?" She only said, "Wow, that was, okay, see you later," and hung up. The next morning she avoided me like the plague. She never talked to me again after that, and we never spoke on the phone again. A part of my soul died that night, and I don't think it will ever be fully restored. Mine bought me a diary encouraging me to write in it. Later stole said diary, broke the lock off, forged a bunch of made-up crushes in there, and then read it aloud at the dinner table to humiliate me. My mother was not very kind. My parents, Southeast Asian, told one of my best friends, who's a girl and Caucasian, behind my back that if she was the same ethnicity as them, they would ask me to marry her. I'm sure they thought this would be very flattering. I found out later, and to this day, over a decade later, it still makes me cringe big time. A lot of people here are asking me if my parents are racist. They're not. This is a cultural thing. I've been married to my Caucasian wife for many years, and they love her. It was my 16th birthday, and my family went to a fancy Italian restaurant. The staff came over to sing happy birthday to me, and my dad started singing along loudly in a bad Italian opera kind of accent. We're not Italian. The staff was so stunned, and they just stopped singing. The other customers around us laughed and applauded, and the staff just walked away. I was mortified. When I was young, we had a pajama day at school, but I always just wore my boxers to sleep. Well, obviously, a kid can't show up to school in just underwear, but I was a little too dumb to understand that. Why my mum allowed me to go and even drove me there, I have no idea. It was the most embarrassing day of my life, and the school had to call my mum to come pick me up halfway through the day. I was in elementary school, but I can't remember if it was first or second grade. And the school didn't notice or care until halfway because I was eating lunch in the cafeteria and kids were staring at me. Some adult must have noticed them. I wore C-cup bras when I was 11 years old. My mum loved to loudly talk about them to anyone who would listen. Yeah, she's only 11. You wouldn't think it from the way she's filled out up top. Then I'd start crying from the humiliation and she'd tell me to lighten up. Seriously, half of these deserve a place in a video I did the other week. What's something harmless your parents did to you as a kid that really screwed you up as an adult? Some of these are equally as traumatizing. Telling everybody at Thanksgiving dinner at her boyfriend's house about my tween bout with anorexia. I didn't want to be there in the first place, and she just kept going on and on about how I had carrots for dinner for a year until I had to shout at her to stop. To her credit, she was immediately embarrassed when she realized what she was doing, and she apologized profusely. I was 13 and waiting for a ride with my sister and parents at Dollywood. Across the way, two very pretty girls about my age were smiling at me. I smiled back and acted all cool because I was a skater boy with skater hair, and my Vision streetwear and some shirt with a skull on it or something. It was working too. The girls whispered to each other and giggled, and one even waved at me. Then my mum reached her damn hand to my face and popped a pimple right there in public. The girls were aghast, I was humiliated, and I have never forgiven her. Oh, I have a Dollywood story too. We were with a church group and my parents were along with us because they wanted to extend our family vacation in the area. My dad was walking around with us and I'd wanted to ride a ride. I couldn't find him after the ride, so I headed up to the front of the organized meeting place like we'd been told. My parents and most of the church group were there. My mom starts yelling at me for running off and spanks me in front of everyone. I was 13. When I was 5 or so, my preschool did a play based on Noah's Ark. It was a pre-K attached to a church. We were instructed that our costumes were supposed to be raincoats, rain boots, or umbrellas. I didn't have any of those things, but begged my dad to get me at least one of them so I'd fit in and follow the guidelines. Fast forward, the night of the play, I'm frantically scanning the audience because my dad is always late. He finally shows up and brings me a life jacket. I had to stand up there with all the kids in their little raincoats in a life jacket. I was really embarrassed. Dad's defense was that I was the only kid who would have survived the flood. I can laugh now, but I sure wasn't laughing then. My father was a huge racist and used pejorative terms to describe other people. I knew about the words for African Americans, Chinese people, and Japanese people, so I never said them. Little me didn't know about the other words. I used one in class to answer a question my history teacher asked, and he was properly horrified. I was immediately removed from class, and my confused butt was grilled for hours about my word usage. I finally said I didn't know what I did wrong. My dad says it all the time to describe people from that country. They called my mum, and I had to go home. There was a shouting match between my parents and my dad's mother that night, and I was beaten soundly by my father. Mum made me call my 8th grade social studies teacher at home to ask if I could use him as a job reference. He lived with his parents still, and I asked for him by first name. He waited for me at my locker the next day to tell me to never phone his house again, parents' house, and never call him by his first name again. Didn't get the job either. Mum denies this ever happened and claims she would never demand I do something so strange. Don't you hate it when your parents become revisionist historians? I came home from school with head lice. Instead of telling the teacher, who would send a letter home to everyone without it specifically naming which child they noticed had lice, my mother rang every person in my class that she had the phone number of. She would have a chat with the parent, all, "Yeah, she has head lice, so you need to check your kid." I probably got it from someone in my class, and the whole class likely already had lice, but kids don't realize that, so the whole class were calling me dirty and saying that I'd infected them. It was horrible. I was hysterically crying while she called people. I didn't expect so many people to read this, so to address the concerns, she never did anything bad ever in my life except this, and she kept saying, "Don't be stupid, I'm just telling their mothers so they can sort it," and presumably didn't expect them to tell their 7 or 8-year-olds who it was. Clearly someone did, because the whole class knew it was just me by the next day. Seems there's a lot of comments below with similar stories of adults having no clue how oddly shameful it is to have lice when you're little, which sucks, but kids will jump on anything to be mean sometimes. I have aggressive Crohn's that started showing up around 8th grade. My mum took me to all of my doctor appointments, which were all pretty embarrassing because no teenage boy wants their mum involved in their butt-related illness. One particular visit, we were about halfway through the appointment when she whipped out a Cool Whip tub. Turns out the following night I used the bathroom and it didn't all go down, so she thought it would be helpful to load up that in our poor people Tupperware and haul it into the doctor so he could look over it. He had the confused, "What am I supposed to do with poop in a Cool Whip tub?" face for a good 5 to 10 seconds, then politely dismissed it. Who would have thought there isn't any medical knowledge to be gained from fishing poop out of the toilet, refrigerating it overnight, and schlepping it up for an office visit? When I was a senior in high school, I had left the lights on in my truck all day and had to call my dad to come and jumpstart my car. Now, my father is 6'1" and has a very large belly. Mother Fricker rolls up in cloth shorts and no shirt to jumpstart my car. Then there was a time a few years earlier that my mother had him sent up to school to give me a sandwich before a football game. The man's boxers were longer than his shorts. "He's always there for you when you frick up though, isn't he? He'd give you the shirt off his back if he was wearing one." This is actually something people have said about him. People who quit their jobs on the first day, what was your "I'm out of here" moment? I used to work at a craft store as a cashier, but quit when I moved. Ended up going back a couple of years later to make some extra cash, but this time in the framing department. During the interview, they swore up and down I would only ever be a backup cashier because I refused to have a full cashier shift. First shift after the interview was listed as framing, but I'm put on cash and told that actually most of my shifts would be cash since they'd found someone else for framing. I spent the next 6 hours giving everyone who came to my register 20% off everything and then never went back. Not technically first day, but second day. When I was 20 or so, I got hired to be a temporary floor member for Forever 21 during the holiday season. My training started a week before Black Friday, so the store was already kind of in chaos. On my first day of training, I walked in and the floor manager gave all the new hires a tour, showing us the facility and layout of the store. After this, I was assigned to a veteran floor member to shadow and get an idea of what my job was and what my duties would be. As soon as I was assigned, the manager dipped, never to be seen again. An hour and a half into my shift, my shadowee got an emergency family call and had to take off for a week. When this happened, I found some other floor manager and explained the situation and asked them who else I would shadow. The manager's response was, "Just do what you can by yourself, you'll be fine, everyone else is busy." Figured we'll be okay, so I'll try. I don't know if any of you have shopped in the women's section of Forever 21, but during seasonal sales they'll have multiple articles of clothing that all look exactly the same, with slight differences. Example, a white cardigan with 4 buttons that looked literally the same as a white cardigan with 5 buttons. The best part was these different items were often placed in completely separate parts of the store, and it was the job of the dressing room to return the unpurchased items to the correct section so the employees could put them back on the shelves. Well, these employees fricking sucked, and I didn't know if they were part of my section or not, so I'd spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to find where they'd go before realizing, wait, this isn't even my section. I've checked literally every rack. So I'd put it back on the sorting rack and moved to the next item. More than 50% of the stuff I was told to reshelf wasn't my section. I just did as best as I could and got ready for my next miserable day. The next day I come in and the store manager pulls me to her office and told me how slow I was the day before, and if I want to keep working there, I need to be very fast. I explained my lack of training and unfamiliarity with the store, and she told me if I didn't know where the clothes were in sections, I should come in on my free time and memorize where stuff was at. I spent the rest of my shift putting clothes in random fricking places, then never came in for a third shift. Frick that place and frick their management. Nothing as satisfying as hearing a person do what we've all wanted to do at times, flipping off the manager for their unreasonable bullcrap and leaving. My first internship was at a Brazilian teen detention center. It's akin to a prison, but Brazilian law has some distinctions between crimes committed while as an adult or a teenager. Teens go through socio-educational measures. I was walking through a courtyard with my supervisor when some doctors came running, flailing their arms and screaming while officers came running from the opposite direction. I get pulled by my supervisor who just tells me to run back to our office. These teens, as young as 12, had escaped their block. A few minutes later, an officer comes knocking on doors and the officers and yelling for everyone to run outside because a fire had broken out. Some of the teens had set mattresses on fire in their cells. I didn't really nope out, my teacher did. She hadn't even been there that day, so I was forced by the university to choose another place to intern at. Oh well. I was 17 and working precast concrete. Refused to use a rusted-to-crap ladder. Supervisor called me a wuss, got up 7 rungs before his foot went through a rung, heard his foot snap as he fell. I called an ambulance and walked to my car in the parking lot. Wasn't exactly the first day, but I didn't show up after the second shift. It was rather a popular cafe chain in my country. I was hired to work in the kitchen as a cook along with another senior cook. Let's put aside the fact that I had zero cooking knowledge whatsoever. The senior cook was leaving the kitchen every 5 minutes to smoke. I was just there alone, in the kitchen. Orders are printing fast and I'm standing there not sure what to do first. And the waitress comes over yelling at me to cook stuff I don't have any business cooking, definitely not on my own. Later on, the senior cook told me they had at least 2 rats running around the kitchen. Showed me they pooped on a plate. I never came back, and I'm glad the place got shut down. On the first day of working at Amazon warehouses, the managers broke down to everyone how a 15-minute break works there. Walking to the bathroom is 2.5 minutes, 10 minutes of actual break, and then 2.5 minutes to go back to your stations. It took me 2.5 minutes to walk to my car, and I took a forever break. Summer job working for a landscape architect. Got to the job site and he asked me to dig a hole in some rocky dirt. I asked for a shovel. He didn't have one. I asked for a hand spade. He didn't have one either. He told me to just dig a hole with my bare hands and then drove off to another site, leaving me completely alone. I dug for a little bit and then said, "Frick this," and left. Had the job specified that I needed to supply my own tools, I could have, but it didn't, and I wasn't going to work for someone that expected folk to dig through hard, rocky soil with their hands.
Huh? Sounds like he sucks at communicating. Those bosses are the worst.
I'd say he's got bigger fish to fry than communication. Guy runs a hole-digging business with no shovels. I noped out of an interview one time, thanked them at the end and said it wasn't for me. Those interviewing, management-level folks, started arguing with each other in front of me during the interview. I figured if this is the vibe at the management level, then I sure as heck don't want to be your employee. Answered an ad in the paper, this was in the mid-90s, for what seemed to be an office job making sales calls when I was in college. did a phone interview, and was called back for an in-person interview. When I go to the interview, I'm led into a room with about 50 other people and a small stage at the front of the room. We're all somewhat confused as to what's going on. Finally, a guy gets on the stage and informs us that we've been selected for the opportunity to sell Cutco. Me and 2/3 of the rest stood up and walked out. Anytime I see more than a dozen people for a job interview, I just nope the frick right out. If it's not door-to-door sales paid only on commission, it's some multi-level marketing crap. I wish some job interviews would be more forthcoming about that. Some places have outright lied to me. Legitimate response. I think that last person's rule about the number of applicants is a fairly good one to go by. I just wish I'd walked away from my first bullcrap door-to-door job. I was a cashier at Lowe's during college for less than a full day. I made it through the multiple-day training, but there was so much stupid crap going on, I almost thought I was on a hidden camera show. All the employees complained about how hard they had to work while simultaneously not getting enough hours. Nobody understood why they were hiring like 4 new people. I was one of those 4. Turns out it's because they were progressing through an indecent conduct complaint that required restructuring of the store and firing some of the employees. This was known to HR and explained to new hires, against company policy, but it wasn't known to the employees. Apparently, some of whom still worked there, including the fricking person doing the training. She was really inappropriate and said not to worry about the indecent conduct stuff and that everything would go back to normal soon enough and that we wouldn't have to be so uptight. They fired her the day before I started, along with one of the cashiers who trained me. She also offered me terrible guidance for the application process. They were looking for a part-time help, and 2 of the 3 days they needed help on, I had off from school. I told them I couldn't work nights most nights, but if they needed daytime help, it had to be on one of those days. She said if I was too restrictive, they wouldn't keep me on, and lied to my boss about my availability to make me even more attractive than I already was. Wink! And told me to schmooze them a bit and I'd make it further. She said in the end it wouldn't impact anything and I'd get those days. My first week's schedule, I was working mornings every day that I was in school and I wasn't given any hours on my days off. Aside from the fact that I was given 2 times the hours the position called for, when other employees were shorted, my work schedule was literally impossible to consolidate with my school schedule. I only went to work on my first day to tell them that I was quitting and that their application process was a fricking mess. They couldn't figure out how so much went wrong, and then they asked who trained me and everything made sense. They thanked me for at least showing up to quit, unlike the other 3 they hired, who had just stopped returning their calls and no-showed on their first days. A long time ago, not long after getting my papers as a chef, I had an interview at a hotel for a position in the kitchen. The executive chef and I chatted in his office for about 20 minutes. At the time, I remember him coming off as very arrogant, which is quite common in this field. I didn't think much of it at the time, as the pay was decent and the shift was what I wanted. As I was leaving his office, I turned to leave through the dining room, the way I'd come, which was closed at the time. It was another hour or so before service started, and he says to me, no, not that way. Go through the kitchen. You're not good enough to go through the dining room. I was so surprised by what he said. I just did what he asked without a word. Later on, after I'd got home, I phoned him up and said that after having a close look, I decided that his menu wasn't good enough and that I wouldn't be accepting his offer. Restaurant. Swept under my station when we were closing. Giant brown pile came out with the broom from under the lowboy fridge. The pile then began to scatter. It was hundreds of roaches. Never returned. My first ever job. I was 13 and would be delivering phone books from the back of a van through people's letterboxes. So I'd be in the back of the van with the phone books and there was an older guy slowly driving while I went back and forth to the van/houses with the books. At one point the van was getting empty, so there was more space to move around, and we'd finished the delivery in the streets that we were paid to deliver in, and he drove to another. While driving there, he drove, let's say aggressively, and I fell inside the back where the books were. I wasn't sitting in a seat as the van had no seats in the back. As I put my hand out to steady myself, I accidentally laid it across a portable radio that had its antenna extended, but the antenna was also broken halfway and razor sharp. I sliced the palm of my hand clean open 3 to 4 inches. I can only describe what I saw as gruesome. I said to pull the van over and I needed help. He saw my hand and just threw me a plastic bag, the kind you'd get at a supermarket, and told me to wrap my hand in it. Then continued with the deliveries. At least he delivered the remaining books by himself. I should have been taken to a hospital or at least home to my parents, and I quit after that and never showed up again. As you can imagine, my parents were quite angry at him. Well, as awful as my first after-school delivery job was, it wasn't that bad, and you have my sympathy. At least when I got injured, they would just schedule a later delivery for me. I got hired at a very small knockoff dollar store in an old, failing mall. The owner was foreign with a very thick accent. He told me I'd get $6 an hour, but neglected to mention it was under the table. I spent about an hour stocking the very overly cluttered shelves before I was told to get more chips out of the back storage area. I walk back there and there's about a dozen men sitting on boxes all crammed into a small back room. I asked where the chips were and these guys all glared at me. They started speaking in another language and rapidly motioned towards me. Then one guy got up and asked what I needed. I told him I was supposed to get a box of chips and he got a box out of the pile and handed it to me. The entire time, these guys are all staring at me. Everything back there looked shady as all hell and it was very uncomfortable. A while later, I had to use the restroom, which was also in the back. These guys all just wordlessly glared at me while I went into the woman's restroom. While I was in the restroom, someone tried to open the door. I was the only woman there. The owner told me he wanted me to come back that night late in the evening well after the mall closed. I didn't show up. I came in the next morning and lied about why I couldn't work there. He still gave me the few bucks from what little time I did work. I don't know what in the heck that guy had going on there, and I didn't want to find out. Restaurant line chef. Worked a 12-hour shift and was given 2 breaks of about 10 to 15 minutes each. Burned my hand numerous times because they gave me plates that came right from the oven, and never said a word. End of the shift, I told the head chef I was done. He called me soft and said I was the 3rd person to quit on him after a day. I said, maybe it's the way you treat people. Funny how people think it's not their problem when many people quit working with them. Restaurant owners never seem to get this. I was a hostess at a restaurant like this for about a year. We could never hold on to the kitchen staff because they were worked to the bone and barely paid. It affected the whole restaurant. Dishwashers were either swamped or had nothing to do because the tickets were too backed up. Busboys were the same. The servers got crap tips because the food was so slow and the managers were constantly comping food and getting chewed out about long waiting times. And even the hosts had long waits and sections full of empty tables we couldn't sit because we were trying to let the kitchen catch up. Then the idiot owner would come in, sit everyone on my list, and go yell at the kitchen for being slow. We were lucky if new guys lasted a week back then. Restaurant work is a joke. I've been in New York City restaurants on and off for about 10 years. They all turn to crap or just start as bullcrap right from the get-go. My last job was as a sous chef. I'll never work the line again. 2 times. Once I applied for and got a telemarketing job. I didn't know what it entailed. After an hour, I knew it was a terrible fit. Auto-dialing people during their dinners, trying to sell them stuff they didn't want, and reading a horrible script while sitting in a soulless grey cubicle. I got up, went to the manager, apologized, and said it wasn't a good fit for me. He seemed understanding. Another time, I attended a Make Easy Money at This Job seminar, and turns out it was selling knives door to door. I don't know if I technically quit or just noped out at the end of it. I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis, but it was sporadic, so I thought some after-hours babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock, as well as doing the housework. I would have 1 day off every 2 weeks. They said it's cash in hand, so I could sign on to the dole, unemployment benefit, to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemaid and a nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was basically up to me to illegally collect the dole and subsidize them, I don't know. Applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant, celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout, as I communicated I was looking at other job possibilities as well. I come in and they just stick me on dishwasher for an hour. No biggie. Then the dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay on their lunch rush. Says I'll get paid for the hours. I do. Kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out, even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably wouldn't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple of weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly paycheck. I do, and she basically tells me to frick off over text. Tells me it was staging, and that she had told me I wouldn't be paid. I respond that I understand, but that I stayed for an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding, and I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the state labor department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours, including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later I got my $40, never went back to that restaurant. In hindsight, I'm very glad I did this, and sharing the story with others in my city, I learned this practice was very common with local restaurants. Hopefully, others learn to stand up for their labor too from my small experience. Secondly, this restaurant closed down a couple of weeks after I got that paycheck. The owner made a long-winded complaint on the Facebook page about how the food culture had changed in the city and her restaurant didn't fit in anymore. Total bullcrap, they were always popular. Most people theorized the terrible mismanagement and employee abuse caught up to her. It's interesting. This story is from about 5 years ago, and I stopped my long restaurant career about 7 years ago. I wonder if there's been any significant transformation in restaurant culture, or if it's still the same exploitative crap at different date. Maybe you modern waiters and chefs can let me know in the comments. More hospo stories to follow. I was a waitress, the only waitress at a just-opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork, everything was under the table. But that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at the upper thigh, not quite the butt, but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen? Rather than call me, he would come out, pinch my skirt, and pull me to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine? Again, come over to wherever I was. Didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and he would grab my skirt to pull me. That act, in itself, made some customers uncomfortable. Mind you, one couple left almost 50% tip at the end, but I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job wasn't for me. I came in a couple of days later to turn in my apron, and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. God, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. When the microwave in the lunchroom was coin activated. This is like when I made my patrons pay money to use the bathrooms at my roller coaster park when the ticket prices weren't cutting it. Amazing move. Had an orientation for an alarm company. Next day, the manager calls and says don't worry about going into the office and to meet at Planet Hollywood. They like to get to know the employees better over lunch. Next day, I go into the office and another employee who I had not met says, "You must be Steve." I was like, huh? They responded, "Light-skinned, pretty boy," is how the manager described me. In the same conversation, I found out no one else had ever been invited for a get-to-know-you lunch. And I was out. Got what was supposed to be a prestigious political internship that came with a security clearance and everything. Found out at orientation that the part-time internship was really 40 to 60 hours unpaid, and that no intern had gone on to work with the organization and weren't really given a leg up for other federal posts. We were supposed to facilitate meetings with heads of state, coordinate conferences, and assist the actual employees with composing published research papers for which we would not be credited. They were definitely drinking their own Kool-Aid, so I bounced right on out of there. I was hired to be a waitress, which has a lower hourly wage due to tips. The entire shift they had me wash dishes in the sink, but paid me waitress wages. A few months later, the restaurant was investigated for another of fraudulent activities. I interviewed for a professional marketing assistant and got the job straight away. I was under the impression that I would be an assistant to the man I was interviewed by. When I showed up for my first day, the same waiting room I was in the previous day was full of people. I quickly learned that we were all hired and I would be a door-to-door salesperson selling some pretty useless crap. I spent my entire day inside a Starbucks applying for other jobs and went home, got paid, but never came back. I wasn't the person, but I was training a new guy at a movie theater. A customer asked for extra butter. She was nice and normal. Not a mean or rude customer, the kind I would pay to handle all day long. He puts the popcorn tub down, says, "I'm going to the bathroom," takes off his apron and walks out the front door and never came back. Maybe he crapped his pants and couldn't bear the thought of returning. My brother got fired because he crapped his pants on the third day on the floor and had to go home early. They said they fired him because he wasn't upselling enough at the register. But if you get fired on your second day on register for not trying to get people to sign up for credit cards and the day before you crap your pants, you got fired for crapping your pants. If you make 10,000 shoes, you're a shoemaker. If you fly 10,000 hours, you're a pilot. If you crap one pair of pants, you're the pant crapper. How have you observed or used body language to your own advantage? The most amazing occurrence of body language I've witnessed was a friend back in high school that could control our group of friends. Whenever we were standing in a circle and he wanted to speak, he would simply take a step or two towards the middle. This would cause everyone to quiet down, effectively giving him room to speak uninterrupted. We didn't catch on for a while, but the way he was able to perform it so subtly was amazing. I believe this has to do with personal space and how we instinctively react to an incoming presence.
Similar simple ways to control a group. If you're eating dinner and everyone is done and just chatting, simply stand up. People usually follow suit almost unconsciously. Alternately, if you're a group or milling around but should be heading somewhere, just start walking. Generally, everyone will follow. Sometimes I have to tag a friend or two to start walking with me if part of the group is not paying attention, but once you get 3 or 4, the rest tend to follow. Anyone not following due to being engrossed in conversation will soon go, "Wait, where did everyone else go?" and chase after you. I do this a lot at crowded sci-fi and gaming conventions when my group needs to be at a panel or meet up. Next up, we have a rather long story about an individual who seems to have mastered this particular subject matter and used it fully to his own advantage. I once sat next to a guy in my college class that was unreal with things like this. For instance, once before class, while we were waiting outside the room for the professor to arrive, he saw a pretty girl coming down the hall. Immediately, he goes, "I'm gonna go talk to her," but doesn't move. I'd always known the guy was suave beyond my years, so I'm really curious as to what his icebreaker is going to be and waiting to see this in action. Being a bit unsure of myself in my early college years, this was like Houdini personally giving me a behind-the-scenes look at a magic trick. The girl was very pretty but had sort of a sour look on her face. In my head, I'm like, no pickup line in the world is cracking this iceberg. Then I watched the true master in action. My first mistake was ever assuming he needed an icebreaker in the first place. He didn't simply start a conversation by saying something, or anything. He used his body posture to make her start the conversation with him. As nonchalantly as you could get, he pulls out his cell phone and pretends to look down at it. When she's about 3 feet away from us while still glancing down, he takes a half step in her direction, in her path. In one smooth motion, he looks up, fakes a reaction of, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention," as he takes a half step back to make room for her and leans back against the wall. Her, apparently totally sold on his genuine surprised look and repositioning to make room for her. "Oh, thank you." Him, "Hey, no worries. Traffic these days." "Huh. Yeah, is that Professor X's cost accounting class?" Yeah, how did you know that? Are you an accounting major?" "Yeah, I'm in IA2 right now." How majors refer to intermediate accounting 2, meaning she was about 1 semester behind us in the course cycle. "Well, you'll do fine if you can handle IA2. It's more difficult than cost accounting is. The trick is to..." "Oh, really?" And the conversational small banter continues. He also told me later he already knew she was an accounting major by recognizing the book she was carrying when he first glanced up from his phone. Don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to in the first conversation, but people like to think they're being informative. This guy was full of these little insights, and how good he was on this bordered on socially manipulative. So yeah, body language is unbelievably powerful for how subtle it is. To answer some of the inquiries I'm getting about this story, I would say he was average looking on the whole, but he certainly knew how to carry himself, and he did dress nice as well. Sitting next to him can also confirm his cologne was on point. So I don't think he had any unnaturally good looks, but good posture, good dress, and a general clean, hygienic appearance will help maximize anybody's potential. And of course, he had that unmistakable aura of natural confidence. You could tell him his car just blew up, and the first thing he'd do was lean to the girl next to him and go, "Hey, I need to go car shopping. Want to come with me?" No, he wasn't even close to being creepy. That's what was so unreal about it. For the first few weeks, that was my thought as well. Nobody's this good without being a serious creep. Or, he does this just to bang chicks. Once again, my mistake. It was never about doing the deed with women. In fact, he never made any kind of comment like that whatsoever. No innuendos, no, "Bro, this chick is so hot." Nothing. He genuinely wanted to meet and get to know this girl to see if they had any chemistry. That simple. And no, he wasn't really a pickup artist. No, he didn't have any hack to the system. There was no good lines. The guy wasn't trying to teach me anything. Although he ended up teaching me quite a bit. This guy just was. I don't think he could teach it even if he really wanted to. What I learned was merely through observation. The beauty of it was how subtle it was, and I wonder if he even knew all of it consciously, or if it was just ingrained subconsciously. For example, when she first said, "Oh, thank you," we were both leaning against the hall wall and she was passing in front of us. Simple enough. By the time the conversation progressed, we were in more of a triangle-type shape, more inclusive, but I never even saw the fricker move. Don't recall anything of us shifting positions whatsoever, but there we were. And only after going over it in my head 1,000 times did I even recognize that it happened, let alone know how it might have made her feel more welcomed. So subtle. But there in the moment, I find it hard to believe that it was part of a calculated endeavor on his part. And I know it wasn't on mine. Like I said, he just was.
If I learned one thing from this guy, it would be this. There's a saying in the running world that if you want to be fast, don't try and run fast, try and run easy. And then, when you can run easy, try and run light on your feet. Don't worry, if you can run easy and light on your feet, you will be fast. Same concept applies. If you want to be good at meeting women, don't try and be good at meeting women, put some effort into yourself. Dress well, shower, exercise, these things matter. Learn to get to know all kinds of people of both genders because you want to get to know them. And do it till it's easy for you. Don't worry, if you can put some effort into yourself and getting to know people is easy, you will meet women. And there we have it, folks, the man who just apparently lives and breathes this stuff. I'm still not entirely sure he was all that, and maybe the writer of the story is just a little bit infatuated with him themselves, but there we go. To me, the absolutely most important thing I've learned about body language is that it had to be taken into context. What else they're doing, what they're talking about, who they're talking to, where they are, etc. When starting to observe, it's easy to take one gesture or posture or expression and go, hey, look, crossed arms. That equals defensiveness. Or whatever, but that's only one part of an equation. If body language is an actual language, then crossed arms is just one word. You can't figure out what someone is saying by just looking at one word. You've got to look at the whole sentence. I often catch myself mirroring the actions of people I'm interested in, so I guess that's something. Agreed, it's a circular paradox. I can never work out if I'm mirroring them or they're mirroring me. Either way, it definitely indicates interest. During a job interview, sit in the same posture as your interviewer is sitting in. It gives the impression that you're feeling the same way that they are. I don't think you're right for this job. My thoughts exactly, sir. Both get up and leave. In a quiet room full of people, for example, a classroom, scream as loud as you can in your mind. Anyone that winces is a mind reader. You should watch out for them. Wow, I'm surprised I'd come this far in the thread to get to the important stuff. I just did it, and someone wouldn't stop staring at me for 5 minutes. Confirmed. Not exactly body language in the traditional sense, but I've sold 6 or 7 houses in my time, and I've always known which viewer would put on an offer by the fact that they 1. Used the bathroom, and 2. Altered something. It's held true every time. I stage my houses very carefully, and I know when anything has been moved, or used, or changed, and would tell my husband to expect a call from the agent that evening. My guess is that the folks are subconsciously taking possession or marking territory. Ah yes, christening the toilet is vital when moving into a new home. Failing that, peeing your initials into the master bedroom carpet is an acceptable substitute. When it comes to non-verbal communication, you don't just like for one particular behavior, you're looking for clusters, and even then, nothing is ever 100% true. Also, you have to take into consideration different cultures have different mores. What's considered acceptable in one culture might not be in another. In a group conversation, people will tend to look at the person they're most comfortable with the most. Self-touching is often a sign a person is nervous or anxious. Lip-biting is often a sign of arousal. Pupil dilation is a sign that a person is excited, and possibly on substances. I think that changes in body language are more significant than anything else. For example, and I've had this pointed out to me, I normally stand with a pretty straight posture, ex-figure skater here. But when I start talking to someone else I think is cute, I quite obviously arch my back and shift my weight entirely onto one hip. This might be a normal posture for someone else, but the shift is what makes it significant. In conclusion, don't trust static body posture. Someone could have just been chilling like that. Watch how their body position changes when you approach. That's possibly a valid hypothesis. I think I definitely shift and shuffle a bit more when I'm anxious or uncomfortable about something or someone, so maybe this post author knows what they're talking about. Speaking from someone who used to be in car sales, some guys look for the wiggle during test drives. That's shifting in the seat while driving to get more comfortable. Probably something to do with taking mental ownership of the vehicle. Hands in pockets or arms crossed equals defensive. Needs more rapport building before pitching. Some people are so intimidated about walking into a dealership that they prefer to walk the lot after business hours at night. That's fine too. We had a computer programmer so overly stimulated that we recognized that and organized a quiet room for him to sit down and discuss his options. He bought the car and thanked us. Some things like handshakes are culturally specific. I always greeted someone with a firm handshake and look in the eye. Clients from India generally give limp shakes because that's more usual if they shake at all. Chinese and Japanese prefer no bodily contact in business. A quick bow or nod usually suffices. For farmers, whoever speaks first loses. There was a guy who regularly came in to look around, and all these sales guys tried to pitch him. He eventually brought from the one guy who kept his mouth shut and ignored him. Not sure how that works. Always know who the boss is. Do not assume it's the man or the woman based on who's talking the most, based on hetero norms. Both parties need to be engaged. Very low chance of a deal without the spouse, regardless of what someone says about being able to make a decision. Work and loss prevention. This one, among many, many others, is almost always true. When a person has made the decision to shoplift and is about to conceal, they look like they're peeing in the pool. Every time. LP is all about body language. Or they're like me and they're paranoid that they changed their mind about that thing they were going to buy and put it back, but then picked it up again, and now everyone thinks I'm shoplifting, but I swear I'm not. And no, I do not need assistance, and I'm a normal average customer, just going about my casual business in your fine establishment. I don't want to go to prison. I won't make it in prison. Shaking someone's hand can make you memorable. This is just something I've observed, so I'm not passing it off as a general truth. When I meet someone new in a casual setting, a friend of a friend, someone's co-worker, someone's family member, etc., a person who acknowledges your existence and makes their way over to shake your hand will have an immediate impact on me over someone who just smiles and nods or waves or whatever. I feel more comfortable with someone who makes the initiative to shake your hand for whatever the reasons may be. I'm much more likely to approach someone whose hand I've shaken to learn more about them at some point in the night. This very much goes in the business world as well. I know it's common knowledge to shake someone's hand when you meet them first time in a business setting, but if someone approaches you to shake your hand while they're leaving, they are far more memorable in my mind. It gives me a sense of belonging, knowing that someone thought about me in particular before leaving a place or setting and had to make their way over to let me know they're leaving. This also works with customer-client relationships. If a customer shakes my hand after a transaction is completed, I'll remember them and may give them some sort of incentives or discounts next time I see them. Americans love a firm handshake, but the same custom is not necessarily true in other countries. It can also be a male thing, with some men using a crushing handshake and holding it for a long time, making it a move of dominance. Lyndon Johnson used to hold the handshake and then grab the lapel of the other man's suit with his other hand, and then stand very close until he got the answer he wanted. Pediatrician here. Girls as young as 9 to 12 will start twirling or playing with their hair if they are attracted to someone. It's pretty adorable to see it develop. This doesn't have to be a romantic attraction, you weirdos. It can happen when they see someone doing something impressive, talking to someone important, etc. This behavior continues but can take on many different patterns, like pushing their hair forward. Some guys take this as a sign that the girl is covering up, but it's probably closer to, "Hey, look at my pretty hair." Take a look at the audience during The Voice or whatever country has got talent, etc. Look at the audience when a slightly cute boy sings decent or better. It's hilarious to watch. It's like a collective sploosh among the girls ranging from 12 to 32. Well, now I can't unread this ever, and now if I ever watch a show with a studio audience, the people I'm watching with are going to wonder why I burst out laughing when a good-looking man walks on stage and there is a camera shot to the audience. When one person grooms another during social interaction, "Oh, you've got some lint on your shoulder, let me just..." She or he is being subconsciously affectionate to that other person and welcoming him or her into the pack. I mean family. Like monkeys picking each other's nits. I had a teacher that was a former cop. He pointed out that a person in a normal state of mind will swing their arms slightly while they move or walk. Angry people have a tendency to hold their arms at their sides and not move them. Always true? Maybe not. Often true? Sure. The same basic rule applies here, and also implies that you're trying to hide something. If your hands sit unmoving in your pocket, you're most likely angry but attempting to keep this hidden. Brooding, if you will. If they're swinging around in there, you're in a normal state of mind or attempting to hide the fact that you're publicly pleasuring yourself. But what if you just want to put your hands in there because you don't like flailing them around? Clearly, any attempt at comfort and ease is a sign of being angry. There's too many absolutes in this thread. I had purposely unbuttoned and tucked the flaps of my 2 breast pockets into the pockets before going out a few weeks back because I wanted to try the look. Anyway, while talking to a female friend, she reached over and fixed them. I thought it was rather endearing. I often fixed my boyfriend's sleeves when we were first going out. I still do, but I did it back then too, and I kept apologizing, just like, "Sorry, that was bugging me. It was all flipped up." And finally, after a handful of months, he said, "No, he really likes it when I do that." I never understood why, but I guess it's probably for this reason.
It's a welcoming feeling, I guess, someone fixing you up to make sure you look nice. People who mimic your body language don't want to displease you. That's as close to universally true as these things go. You cross your arms, they cross their arms, that sort of thing. Nervous people often lick their lips and swallow. Liars often do too, as well as touch their mouth, but it can be delayed after the lie when they feel like they've got away with it. Like if you respond with, "Oh, that makes sense," that's when they lick their lips. People falsely accused of lying generally have a stronger reaction than those caught in the lie. One-on-one, that sometimes comes out as the honest person confronts you face-on, while the liar turns a little away. It's more about the line of their hips and shoulders, not so much where they point their nose. I once read that if someone is accused of something they didn't do, they'll be more likely to use contractions in their speech. Something to do with being so comfortable with their own innocence that they speak informally. I didn't twist her arm. Truth. I did not twist her arm. Lie. Maybe bunk, but when applied to my children, I find it's fairly accurate. I did not have relations with that woman. If you're in a situation where you have to pretend to be surprised, keep your eyebrows raised for more than a second. That's a telltale sign. Genuinely surprised people will keep their face in that state for more than 1 second. I'm pretty sure you just made 10,000 people raise their eyebrows and pretend to be shocked at something, only to find that they looked ridiculous. I discovered this one on my own, although I probably wasn't the first. This works for girls and guys. When someone suddenly sees someone they find attractive, the first thing they usually do is fix their hair. They usually can't stop themselves. It's an instinctive thing, like, "Oh, someone's hot, gotta look fly." So the next time you're walking about and someone fixes their hair right when they see you, they're attracted to you. Can confirm. I always do this when looking at the mirror. Wandering eyes in a shop. Not the determined kind, the thinking kind. They're looking for presents. This observation has become so spot on that I ask our customers, "So, who are you getting a gift for?" And that always surprises them and breaks the ice. People looking to steal something have their eyes everywhere else besides what they're taking. Watching their body versus their eyes is a pretty good sign to customer service them into leaving. I remember saying to some kid that just pocketed some rare earth magnets at my store, "Hey man, those magnets are pretty cool, huh?" He then rounded the corner and stuck them into a metal pole and walked out. I felt more proud of myself for stopping the theft more than the $2 it saved the store. Working in a bookshop, this was usually so obvious you could laugh. You'd get guys walk in, open a random fiction novel in the middle of the book, and start skimming through it like a magazine. But their eyes were never on the pages, they'd never even look at what they were reading. This is a cool switch. According to AmITheA, changing your posture can change your mindset, and your mindset can change your behavior. So, say, sit in a submissive way for just a couple of minutes, and inexplicably, you're not as likely to make assertive positions. Now, changing to a powerful stance, and a couple of minutes later with no prompting, you feel like you're in charge. Assertive and comfortable with making high-power decisions, even when they're a gamble. Glance at their feet. If they're pointed towards you, they're engaged in your conversation. If they're pointed away, often toward an exit, they'd like to end the conversation. I use this at work all the time, and I notice myself doing it. If the person isn't breathing, you should run away because you've killed them in your fit of rage. Works every time. If you see a guy walking down the street and he awkwardly lifts one leg up higher than the other repeatedly, he's trying to peel his sack off his inner thigh without alerting whomever he is with. We mostly do this when we're with women or family. If we're around other guys, no fricks given. I wish my roommate would learn that me walking away from him into my room means it's the end of the gosh darn conversation. Stop bringing new crap up or starting a new story. Mother fricker will keep telling me new crap despite me having disappeared into my room. I don't even act interested. The dude just can't not talk. Someone mentioned body language clues being generally true but not universal. I suffer fairly bad anxiety in public spaces. I've been told by my friends that I look angry as I walk down the street. I've received looks from security staff in shops, maybe in my head because of the anxiety, etc., as I walk around the store looking shifty and darting my eyes everywhere until I settle down. I think I look everything but nervous. I'm sure most people have a more general character, and you can assume body language for them, but a good 10% must have less typical personality traits that affect their body language. If someone hugs you and then pats you on the back simultaneously, they're uncomfortable with hugging you. If you're having a conversation with a girl and some guy just comes in and interrupts the conversation, don't stay. In fact, walk away. If the girl doesn't like that guy, she'll automatically come looking for you. People will always revert back to someone they trust or are interested in. What are the cons of being attractive? You don't know if someone likes you for you or just how you look. They come for the looks and stay for you, I guess. Not always. That's definitely one of the downsides of physical attractiveness. Sometimes people will think they know you, but they don't. And when they discover that you're not just who they imagined you to be, some don't even care who you really are. They just wanted that made-up version and are disappointed when that's not you. This isn't an issue I have anymore as an adult, likely because I know how to handle myself professionally. But in my teens, I had a side job as a mover, and the amount of clients who would be surprised that I was about to graduate with honors and go to prestigious university. It was likely a combination of being just a mover, but also being decently attractive and very physically fit. People project a lot of bullcrap onto you, all from their own heads. Pretty? You must be dumb. Pretty and articulate? First they're shocked, then you're a B-word who has too much self-esteem. Shy and pretty? You must be stuck up. Outgoing and pretty? Who do you think you are, you bossy B-word, clearly chasing after other women's boyfriends? Great figure? You must be a hussy. Great skin? You've probably had work done. Dress well? You waste your whole salary on clothes. Too skinny? You're mentally ill. They armchair diagnose you with anorexia. In a relationship? You're clearly a gold digger. Single? Then you're either a hussy who is playing the field, or you're a snob who thinks you're too good for anyone. You have to work overtime to appear friendly and ease everyone's insecurities. It's fricking exhausting. I wish I could upvote this 1,000,000 times. I can relate so hard to all of these, and there's nobody I can talk to about any of this, because how do you get to complain about being too attractive? People doubt if you're into nerdy stuff as much as you might say. Plus, a lot of your actions just have all these preconceived notions. People think you don't have any problems or struggles. And we've touched upon the problem of the notion of the fake gamer girl, where people are apparently so convinced that people are single-faceted that they can't accept that someone might have more elements to them than their physical appearance. This comment had some interesting follow-ups. Oh, I totally agree to this. I'm a fairly attractive woman, and when I tell people I'm a software consultant in biotech, they almost negatively judge me? Or there's often the, wow, beauty and brains, huh? comment. Like, yes, just because I'm pretty, it doesn't mean I'm stupid. What the frick? I guess it's just a mixture of one or the other and possibly some envy. You have physical looks and intellectual prowess. That can definitely make some folks seethe with inferiority. That's really their problem, though. Plus the impossible dance you must do. Smart but not intimidating. Friendly but not flirtatious. Helpful but not the office assistant. Talkative but not opinionated. And serious but not abrasive. The list goes on. I'm a woman in finance who's decently attractive, at least fit and plain enough to not be considered ugly, and it's an impossible balance to strike. People seem okay to openly suggesting that everything I have, like an education and fitness and a happy marriage, I lucked into. It feels really difficult to toe the many lines. People feel the need to compete with you, find something that makes you look bad, or show fault. One or two co-workers, same gender, jealous, competitive types, will set out to sabotage your success and your relationships with other people when you're just minding your own business and trying to do a good job. You're the immediate target for psychopath types. I think everyone gets that, not only attractive people. As someone who's been both, it's not the same. When you're attractive, lots of the time people of the same sex or gender will view you as a social and sexual threat to them, and act accordingly. These people are usually just super insecure about themselves. Somehow, being kind automatically equals being flirtatious or interested. People don't think attractive people struggle with their mental health, constantly being shamed or mocked out of jealousy, and people praying for your downfall. This. Oh my god, this. Anytime I talk to a male coworker, all the ladies will rush after and say the guy has a huge crush on me or his face lights up when you talk to him. I'm honestly just talking to people, male and female, to actually have a conversation. I'm not flirting and there's no intention on my side. I'm just conversing, people. So frustrating. Loneliness. Friends of the same gender avoid you because they're afraid their partners will want you. Opposite gender only want one thing. My best friend in high school became threatened at some point when the pretty scale tipped in my favor. It had always been in her favor. I feel gross saying this, by the way. I don't consider myself a conceited person. It didn't help that her mother even made comments, urging my friend to stop hanging out with me, not to let her boyfriends meet me. It was so dumb. Years later, I realized they were just shallow and toxic. But yeah, some women will just not like you until you reach middle age. I'm pretty okay talking to girls in general, but then there are the bombshells, 10 out of 10. And there's just something so intimidating about them, and I don't know why. I just can't make decent conversations, at least not at first. I'd imagine it happens a lot to them, and must be quite awkward and weird when you just want to have a normal conversation with people. Creeps. As a below-average-looking woman, I can actually tell you that creeps creep on ugly women too. This is the unfortunate reality that is perpetuated online, mostly unknowingly. People assuming it's mainly attractive people being stalked or something. It's become a large documented thing in Me Too when people believed almost every claim since the actresses were mostly young and conventionally beautiful. But most indecent conduct isn't some creep following you or picking out attractive women. A large majority is done by someone you're close to or related to, in which case it's more about a power dynamic than conventional attractiveness. As someone who's been both young and hot and fat and frumpy, I found that the more conventionally attractive you are, the worse it is. Hot me was harassed every time I traveled home alone at night, and frumpy me enjoyed blissful invisibility. Not only the unwanted attention goes away, people are also less likely to help you or give you free stuff. There's a danger in taking on topics like this of suggesting any one group, in this case the conventionally attractive, have things better or worse than the rest. Hopefully, small conversations like the one I just quoted can highlight the unfairness that will affect people at all levels of perceived aesthetic value. The next comment summarizes one recurring theme in this thread quite succinctly. People can like you way too much or hate your guts with a burning passion really quickly based off nothing. Jogged my memory of a time when I was attending my cousin's Halloween birthday party. My cousin, drunk as a skunk as he should be, ended up smashing a bottle or glass, and I was cleaning it up. Another guy came over to give me a hand. Well, I guess his girlfriend, who I'd never met prior, too noticed and felt a way about it and targeted me the entire night. She kept taking jabs or making random comments about me. The solid proof of her raging, whatever she was on, was at the end of the night when they were leaving and she said goodbye to everyone and pointed at me and said, "But not you. Some people truly just suck." Close friends repeatedly dropping you or even straight up ghosting you when they develop unreciprocated feelings for you and it gets too painful for them. I've got serious abandonment issues. Dating can be hard because people create an image of who they want you to be. It's even harsher if you're attractive and a complete weirdo. People act like you're doing something wrong when you break their perfect image, like you're taking something away from them and ruining a good thing. I can imagine it being a con if people think attractive people are only good for their looks and nothing else. If an attractive person is very accomplished, I feel like others would say they got help from being good-looking and that they didn't work that hard. In my experience, attractiveness became a crappy and unfulfilling value. At times when my self-esteem was low, I often clung on to being attractive as if it was all I had going for me, and developed a dependency on external validation and comparing myself to others. People who are or view themselves as less attractive than you treat you like garbage purely because they don't like that you're better looking than them. This one is especially true for women. Achievements that you make or respect you gain, such as getting a prestigious project at work, being put down by coworkers to the boss wanting to sleep with you. For the longest time, I would just lay in bed after work and just wonder why certain coworkers didn't like me. I knew that my personality can't possibly be compatible with everyone, but it bothered me that people I only interacted with in pleasant, passing little conversations treated me coldly anyway. As one example, I would pick up shifts at a location where this woman always made faces and snarky comments about the lunches I brought to work. "That doesn't look good, to be honest." Or, "That smells off. Are you really going to eat it?" I had no idea how to respond, and she would tend to ignore me if I talked to her anyway. It was like 10 years later when I finally realized that my small size might have had something to do with it, considering she was a large woman who constantly talked about weight. And that bothered me even more, to be honest, because I agonized for months over what was wrong with me, and it turns out it was my looks? It never occurred to me that it could be something as petty as that, but apparently it was important enough to her to make a nervous 20-year-old feel that much more uncomfortable. I'm treated like an idiot, presumed uneducated or naive, not taken seriously until I prove myself, and my absolute least favorite thing, I can't tell if I'm being pursued for my body or my character. I've also been stalked and the victim of attempted unspeakable acts, which supposedly has nothing to do with the way I look, but I've had the urge to completely change so people stop looking at me at all. People never seem to think the partners you choose look good enough, and it's exceptionally irritating that they even expect you to care.
I like this point. As someone who's occasionally punched well above his weight when it comes to dating, I can say that in some cases, eventually you learn to look at the people who judge you lacking as a partner with amusement and disdain. Maybe that's just me though. Girls saying they want to be friends and then they get all moody when you're friendly and don't want to flirt back. Probably worse for women, but still. People manipulate and hide things from you because they either want to satisfy themselves or use you to attract and influence others. You can easily end up out of your depth and in bad relationships without the tools or power to escape. You also attract narcissists. I'm attractive enough that I ended up dating a multimillionaire. She turned out to be controlling and violent and trapped me into a lease that I couldn't afford to leave, all because she liked that I was intimidatingly attractive. I won't make that mistake again. I was unattractive for the beginning of my life into my teens, then around my sophomore year, I became fairly attractive, lost weight, started taking care of myself, etc. The difference in the way people treated me was one of the worst things ever. Everyone was so nice, giving me so much attention, men especially. Once you realize how important looks are to social standing, your life changes a lot in a bad way. My senior year, I had gained all the weight back and all of that attention was gone. Now that I'm 27, I'm still very overweight, but I've learned how to be more confident and comfortable with myself and have attracted attention from people that actually care about me and not how I look. But it's a total mind frick for sure. My first summer job was in tech support. One of my co-workers was one of those human beings you'd just be in awe of if you met them. She was brilliant, Dean's List, biomed student, skipped a grade in school, and also unbelievably pretty. Gymnast turned varsity cheerleader. We had virtually no work to do and just kind of goofed around watching movies or chatting about stuff. Some of the things I remember her telling me about at the time were male friendships not feeling genuine because they were waiting to swoop in once she was single, finding it hard to be taken seriously for her intelligence sometimes, creeps, unwanted attention in public, not directly, but the sense that outside her family and a small group of her very trusted friends, that she might have felt like friendships were superficial. I just derived that from the cheerleader drama stories she shared. I was 18 and had just finished first year of uni as a socially awkward kid anyways, so none of this made sense to me, but looking back I learned a lot from her about stuff like that. People automatically assume that you're swimming in romantic prospects and oftentimes take up a bitter attitude to you for it. The worst I've encountered, while attending a party with a friend and an ex-girlfriend, one Italian girl suddenly stared at me for several minutes. Then later on she went to talk a bit to my ex and said, "I cannot believe he's your boyfriend, he's so handsome." What the frick? Then she came back at me while I was talking with my friends and waited there for maybe 15 minutes, staring at me, trying to talk to me. I didn't know at this point why she went up to my girlfriend and I was feeling something was really off, so I've only really looked at her once in this and never really answered her. She left later on and then I've learned what she said to my girlfriend. These people aren't the worst, I mean they're not murderers or anything, but in my opinion they really suck as human beings because they do not realize the damages they can do with such small talk and behavior. You're never left alone in public. If you do something weird, people are much more likely to notice. But it's far more acceptable to be weird when you're attractive. Being weird as an attractive person is seen as quirky. Headphones. Always. You can't admit how much effort it takes for a huge component of attractiveness. Fitness. So you just have to let people think that you're lucky to be so thin and that it's not a deliberate effort to get sleep, prioritize health, etc. I'm not attractive necessarily, but I'm fit at an age where many of my peers are convinced that getting fat and frumpy is automatic, and it's hard to navigate. I've tried not to counteract what some of these people say so as to not taint their perspective, but I will weigh in as a man of average to low looks but a weird metabolism. Some of us can do no exercise and eat junk food for a year and still look pretty lean and muscular, even if in reality we're kind of weak. So I say the last point isn't universal, but maybe slightly more at an older age. I knew a girl in college who was stunning and smart. She was a med student, and she also had a large chest. She could not have a normal relationship with anyone, women or men. Women were highly jealous, and men couldn't talk to her face. I imagine it made her feel intensely lonely. Overweight most of my adult life. Wife and I lost a lot of weight together and are now in fairly good shape. I never get used to hugs from the women in our social circle. Now I get a lot of attention and greetings hugs. It's a weird change. Wife is wearing more dresses, nothing overly sexy, just very attractive. I noticed most guys we meet watching her walk away or looking her over. We're very committed to each other, so it's not a worry, just weird to have the attention.
People stop taking you seriously. It takes far more effort to get a salient point across.
Depending if this is a con for you, extra attention. Quite frankly, if you're a woman, it's more difficult to be taken seriously at work, since people will think you're just a pretty face. Conversely, if you're in a client role, you may be put in front of the client more often because of your looks. If you're male, good-looking and semi-competent, you'll be promoted through the ranks very quickly, which is a huge pro. In general, regardless of gender, being good-looking does create tension within your gender and social circles, social interactions because you're viewed as competition in the dating pool.
People only like the chase. 3 of my relationships eventually faded out because I was sick of hearing, "You're so pretty," and they know nothing of me as a person. I wanted quality time. I wanted someone to know me as a person. They ended up saying, "You're too nice, you're so caring, I don't deserve you," and it ended. I felt used. At the start of relationships, they go out of their way to do such special nice things for you. They're in it for the chase only.
Definitely creeps. In the same vein, I cannot stand staring. It's a cultural thing, but subconsciously, I take it as a threat or challenge. Also, you can get more dates with anyone you want, but 99% of them only want to be physical, not to actually date you as a relationship material. You start to wonder if your personality is the problem. Friends of the opposite gender just don't exist. When I was ugly or overweight, child, teen, I had tons of male friends. As an adult, I've had guys end friendships with me once they found out I wasn't single, or when they decide I'm worth nothing beyond my aesthetic appeal. If they can't do the deed with me, then they want nothing to do with me, other than to stalk my Instagram. I'm sick of, "Men can't be friends with women." No, you just don't see my value beyond my reproductive organs. Being tempered and propositioned by people that didn't care that I was married, engaged, or in relationships themselves. It planted a seed that people are not as loyal as the perception they tell their significant others, and I brought it home at one point into my marriage. As a man, when someone much younger wants you, it can be intoxicating, and that temptation can be hard to control. Furthermore, when you reject some of these ladies, they go from wanting to screw you at first sight to mean and nasty and full of name-calling just because you won't cheat. Those good-looking people can be hiding evil minds. The older and less attractive I get, the better people in general seem to treat me. When I was young, late teens to early 20s, women were nasty and men wanted me for one reason and one reason only, which is also nasty. I was subject to some pretty unsavory behavior and called degrading names. When you're treated nicely, it's for ulterior motives. Now, I get along with other women, and nobody is unnecessarily and inexplicably nasty to me, and I've actually made decent male friends. Nobody has tried to screw me for social points in years. In general, people take me more seriously and make far less assumptions about my personality and my background. When you're attractive, people tend to assume that everything else in your life is or has been great too, and I swear they used to imagine me living on daddy's yacht, sunbathing, and only lifting a finger to go shopping, based on the assumptions people used to make about me and the way they treated me. I had a few older men call me princess and act like I needed to be taught lessons about hard work and friendship, which was infuriating because my family was homeless when I was growing up, and I'd been working since I was 14. But when you're pretty, people take one look at you and ask, "What would you know?" Overall, people behave very strangely around people they view as conventionally attractive, and they make a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of bias, and that is a massive con. People almost never accurately judged me as a person. I felt like many people looked at me, but nobody actually saw me. Getting older has been a relief. People ask me actual questions about who I am and where I come from now. Far less people look at me, but I feel more seen than I ever did as an attractive young woman. I can't wait to turn 40. Now that I work in a female-dominated environment, I take extra care to make the younger, beautiful women feel seen and not just looked at. I like this approach of using your experience from both sides of the perceived aesthetic aisle and using it to empathize with those who suffer from the undue prejudices of society. People think your feelings can't be hurt. They assume your confidence is at a 100 and they can criticize your whole look without ever hurting you. Or maybe they want to hurt you for it. And it's difficult to get people to listen to the content of what you're saying. And you can say something insanely profound and be hit with, "Well, you're too pretty to worry about such things." The assumptions people make, that's the sucky part. You're more likely to experience manipulation or be outright preyed upon. For women, people won't take you seriously, and if you marry an unattractive guy with money, you'll probably be seen as a trophy wife by others. Other girls may find you threatening. If you have a friend of the opposite gender, their partner may find you threatening. My job has put me in positions with female models, and the main things I've noticed are a lot of people neg them. It's like they can't imagine this beautiful person can be nice or smart, so they constantly chip away at them, and many times it works.
Being attractive doesn't bring down the cost of bacon.
Getting constantly hit on by a gender you're not into. Boyfriend and I are both decent looking and straight, and 80% of people who hit on us are the same gender as us. We both give off gay vibes without trying, I guess. I'm not even that attractive, and yet going to clubs and stuff gives me the ick. Like, I love dancing and hanging out with my friends, but I'm so sick of creeps trying to grab me, or just following me around or whatever. If I'm on a night out these days, I usually only go to clubs and bars if I'm with a mixed group of friends of guys and girls, because as soon as it's just girls, random guys seem to think it's an invitation to get all up in our faces. Usually they leave me alone if I'm also with male friends, but even then, it doesn't always work. I just want to be able to dance without being grabbed or touched. Health inspectors. What's the worst violation you've ever seen? Former inspector here, I once discovered a rat infestation in the kitchen of a hospital. They asked me if I could prove my suspicions, and I pointed out the numerous foodstuffs with 1 to 2 inch circular holes chewed in them, but they didn't seem convinced. I showed them the trail of droppings and footprints coming and going from a hole in the floor drain, but they still didn't seem convinced. I showed them the 3 dead rats I discovered under and around equipment. I think they began to believe me at that point. Citations included rat infestation and absolutely deplorable cleaning practices. Used to have a job working as an inspector for storage tanks at places like dairies and factories. Went to a cheesecake factory, an actual factory for cheesecakes, not the restaurant chain, to test a milk storage tank. It had just been cleaned and was being prepped to be filled with a tanker full of milk. I noticed the floor of the tank was covered in bleach. It turned out the floor manager couldn't be asked to spend the time sucking out the rest of the cleaning fluid used in the cleaning process and, as a standard, just filled the tank with milk on top of dozens of gallons of bleach. His theory was that there was enough milk to dilute the bleach to acceptable consumption levels. I wrote a report and he was promptly fired. By the way, my 12-gallon estimate is just that, an estimate. It was a huge milk storage silo, 40,000 litres if I recall, and roughly half an inch of the floor of the tank was covered in cleaning fluid. The dilutions we're talking about probably wouldn't have been harmful or even tasteable after being pasteurized and mixed with cheesecake ingredients. But that's also a guess, and it's also not the point. My gosh, you already went through the trouble of cleaning it. What the heck was an extra 5 minutes to properly finish the job? Glad he got fired. It was something to do with the extra attachment he'd need to use for the nozzle, or something. Either way, it would have been an extra 30 minutes of work. Something, had he observed, would have kept his job and a clean criminal record. In 2004, 2005, around that time, I drank some milk that had been in a similar situation. Machine wasn't rinsed after cleaning. I was a toddler and got hospitalized. How often does this crap happen? Worked in a restaurant. Sitting in the office one day, I hear an awful squeaking/shrieking noise. Took me a little while to find the source. The source turned out to be a mouse, stuck in some old spilled pancake syrup under a storage shelf, being eaten alive by the mouse stuck next to it. I have had to edit out the several minutes of gagging and string of expletives that I just uttered after imagining that story. You're welcome, viewers. Did food safety inspection at a large slaughterhouse for a while. We did our own inspections each shift and the government inspector stopped by once a day too. One day I came around a corner and one of the workers who was running service for the butchers had dropped a ham on the floor. So the proper way to handle this was for him to leave it there and call for a re-inspector to come pick it up, take it out to carve off any contaminated bits, and rinse it in boiling water. Now, it relatively often happened, meat was dropped on the floor, it's just very, very hard to avoid it when running in a factory setting with human labor. So this was common. What was uncommon was what the guy did. First, he tried catching it as it fell, which would have been fine. No contact with any surface, and he could have just thrown it back into the tub it had fallen out of. He didn't catch it though, it landed on the floor. Thinking that no one was watching, he tried picking it up and dropped it again. He did this 3 times, so first and foremost, he's not supposed to be touching anything that's been on the floor. It cross-contaminates his hands, and he has nowhere to put the contaminated product anyway. But he did this 3 times, and dropped it 3 times. Freshly carved hams can be slippery when wearing vinyl gloves. He then, out of pure frustration and annoyance at the unwieldy ham, dropped down on all 4s and proceeded to pick up the raw, freshly cut, 6-kilo ham by his teeth. Stood up, ham dangling from his chompers, and dropped it into the tub with around 600 kilos of product, and drove off with the tub for processing. He was fired a few minutes after that, and the entire tub of product was discarded. I followed him and let him park the tub before I did a very cliché type of scene. I wish you'd interrupted him while he had the ham in his mouth. Well, yes and no. Had he picked up the ham by his teeth and carried it to the grinder for disposal, technically he had just packed up contaminated product and had to change his clothes and gloves. Of course, carrying anything in your mouth, whatever it fricking is, doesn't fly. But a straight, no prior warning firing? I'm not so sure. Probably though, that wouldn't have been up to me. But when he put it in with the clean product and drove it off to processing, that shows a complete disregard for any sort of understanding of what you should and should not do when working with food. He had made the decision himself even before I dragged him into the office of the shift director. There was no other option. Not a health inspector, but a Chinese buffet near me was closed down because it got a 0 out of 5 in its inspection. I got food poisoning from there once. The staff just got up and left. Locked the door, never went back. All the food was still out and everything. A week later, a man was walking his dog past said Chinese buffet and heard a loud buzzing noise. Looked through the window to see hundreds of thousands of flies had taken to the building as their new home. It was so bad that Pizza Hut next door had to close too. To anyone asking, this was in Gloucester, England. God damn, get a flamethrower in there. Pools that have absolutely no chlorine. Pedicure tubs filters that have never been changed. All their disinfectants were expired. A restaurant that refused to clean up pest feces or urine and refused to properly reheat foods. The kitchen had exposed wood everywhere. Well, it would be exposed if there wasn't a thick layer of grease and no sanitizer. The pools that have no chlorine things happens all the time. As a former pool manager, I can tell you almost right away too when I get unchlorinated water. Chlorine is volatile and will dissipate quickly, especially when it's sunny out. If you're running an outdoor pool and not constantly monitoring the chlorine concentration and the feeds, it will turn into a pond in about 6 hours. At that point, you're just taking a bath with everyone in your town. Also, really shallow baby pool? You can be almost sure that at least once a day it has no chlorine in it. When you're dealing with less than 1,000 gallons, that thing will vacillate like crazy. Well, thank you for that. If you'll all excuse me, I'll just be busy never swimming again in another pool for the rest of my life. In fact, after reading most of these, maybe I'll just never leave my house. When my son was 5 or so, we had a nanny who used to look after him, and she used to take him to a local pub where one of her friends worked. He got used to sitting at the bar, eating a packet of crisps, and drinking a soda. I'm starting to realize as I recount this, as it doesn't reflect too well on my parenting skills. Oh well, he's 17 now, so I guess it's too late for social service to come and take him away. Anyway, the nanny was great, no matter what you might say. The nanny and her friend were around the corner in the other bar, chatting away, when a couple of besuited gentlemen wandered into the bar. My son was laying a line of crisps along the bar, and one of the gents started talking to him. It's worth noting that the regulars in the bar were used to him being there, and often referred to him as the boss. They let him pour drinks and so on, ostensibly under the supervision of the bar staff. Needless to say, it's illegal for 5-year-olds to be employed as bar staff, even in the UK. "I'm in charge here. Would you like a drink?" offered my son, scooting around the back of the bar. No, it's okay, thanks. What are the crisps for?" "Oh, I'm feeding my friend," my son replied. "Really? Where's your friend?" "He lives in that little hole." My son pointed to a hole in the wall toward the end of the bar. "And sometimes he comes out and I feed him." On cue, a small mouse appeared out of the hole, ran along the bar, and started eating the crisps. The men were environmental health officers. The pub was shut down that week and never reopened. Luckily, they weren't police, otherwise the nanny's friend would have been in serious trouble. This story was pieced together from the report of the nanny and also my son, who thought the whole thing was hilarious. The nanny's friend was quite relieved as she hated the job anyway. My favorite Chinese restaurant got shut down. My ex-wife worked for the city, and I asked her what the deal was. She said the health inspectors found something leaking from the ceiling. They lifted the ceiling tile and shined a flashlight and saw multiple eyes staring back at them. It was chickens. They were raising chickens in the ceiling, and chicken crap was dripping into the food that I had been eating at least once a week. How do I get out of this chicken crap outfit? You secure that crap, Hudson. My dad worked pest control, and after working that job, he can no longer eat Chinese food. He said that nearly every Chinese restaurant he had to work in was disgusting and crawling with roaches. But the one that took the cake was when he had to strip down in the kitchen after a ceiling tile broke and roaches fell into his overalls. My dad did pest control. I went to hang out with him one night, and he took me to a Chinese food restaurant. When we were done eating, he was lingering over his tea, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, looks like they're closing up soon. I think we're keeping the folks from getting done." He's cool and calm. It'll be fine. So we sit. He pays the bill, and we wait. Finally, they're shutting off the lights out front, and I'm losing my mind. I'm horrified, embarrassed, and I'm thinking, these poor people. Finally, Dad stands up and says, "Be right back." He comes back in with his gear. He proceeds to treat the place for their rat problem and the roaches. He gets me to help him carry and move stuff so he can do his job, and doesn't see any problem with this. In conclusion, Pest Control Dad treats a restaurant for nasties right after we eat there. My stepdad used to be a baker in an authentic recreation of an 18th century New French fortress. Because they sell bread to the public, the health inspector came by, and she was ripping into my stepdad for violations like the stonework walls, the doorless entryways, or the lack of mosquito zappers. He pointed out that they were following the highest standards except for things that would destroy the authenticity of his 18th century bakery. The health inspector relented and agreed to give him a pass after verifying the food storage area was secure. They went to the shed, which was a doorless building attached to the bakery. As the health inspector went in, there happened to be an escaped cow licking all the loaves. My stepdad could only say, honestly, this never happens." They passed the health inspection. In conclusion, health inspector witnesses escaped farm animal licking all the bread in a bakery and passes the health inspection anyway. Does your stepdad live in a sitcom? That would explain a lot. Like the laugh track that plays any time he cracks a joke, even if it starts only the two of you in the room. "My name is Cow, and when at night, or when the moon is shining bright, and all the men have gone to bed, I stay up late, I lick the bread." My friend was inspecting a restaurant and walked out the back to find a man stirring a huge pot of curry. With his arm. No spoon or anything. Just up to his hairy elbows in curry. I'd be more worried about how cold the curry is that he was able to stick his arm in it. Most people in the food industry have insane tolerance to heat. I've not worked in a commercial kitchen for some time, and I can still pick up a pan out of the oven with my fingertips for a brief period of time. Can confirm, people would warn me that something was too hot to touch, and I'd be like, "It's cool, I have waitress hands." Or alternatively, "Fire cannot kill the dragon." I like to think it's more a case of working in the service industry kills your will to live, so you become indifferent to the plates burning your hands. As a man with asbestos hands, I can confirm, coffee machines, kitchens, and hot plates will give you a D&D-style fiendish resistance to fire. However, on the topic of stirring curry with one's own arm, you are likely better off leaving it to tools. Unless you're the following commenters. Is there a different way to stir curry? Well, only if you're really well hung. I had a health inspector tell me this story. There was a family in which both the elderly mother and a handicapped sibling used wheelchairs. Another sibling lived in the house with them and did all the driving, etc. The health department got a phone call from the local wheelchair company. The brother stopped by and picked up a new, custom-built wheelchair for his sister and for his mother, and returned within about 30 minutes, saying that the sister's wheelchair hadn't been made to the right specifications. It was too small. After he left, the staff noticed several roaches on the chair, so the guy got a call. Apparently, it was summer, Midwest, both hot and humid, and the house was all locked up with no open windows for ventilation, curtains drawn, etc. The inspector entered the house and said it was so stifling hot that he started to get dizzy, and he thought hallucinate. He said there was a sound like leaves rustling in the fall, and the walls and floors were kind of vibrating. He then realized it was because they were literally covered in roaches. He immediately evacuated the 3 people living there, and the next day they tented and sprayed the house. He went in a Tyvek suit and knee-high rubber boots, and said that the dead roaches were about 2.5 feet deep in most parts of the house. I work in a bar in Japan that was connected to a bowling alley and an A&W. Mostly Japanese work there. I'm American, and that place was spotless. Every night at 11 when they left there, they were scrubbing everything. I almost stepped on a guy cleaning the baseboards. You could taste the difference in the food because they kept everything so nice. My girlfriend started working in a frozen yogurt shop. The first week, she decided to clean the yogurt machine one night. The entire inside tank was covered in slimy green and brown mold. Oh, and the shop next door was a hoity-toity gym that catered to mirror-gazing health nut gym rats that just loved that low-cal slime mold yogurt. I haven't eaten frozen yogurt since. When I went to culinary school, one of the professors made the statement,
If you want to know how clean a restaurant's kitchen is, go to the bathroom first before you're seated. If the bathroom is dirty, there's a good chance the kitchen is in the same condition. This is what I do when I enter dives. It's a hell of a lot harder to clean a kitchen than a restroom. If you can't do that, you can be damn sure they don't give a frick about the difficult stuff. While this works for restaurants, it does not work for bars or pubs, except at 11 a.m. A pub's restroom goes really filthy about 15 minutes after the drinking starts. There's dirty, and then there's dirty. Superficial, day-old dirt looks quite different from consistent neglect. Not a health inspector, but my mum used to work at this restaurant where the owner just did not give a crap. It was a Mexican restaurant, and my mum told me once that a lady came in asking for caldo de res, a beef soup, but they didn't have any more meat, at least the one that's used for that dish. They were about to let the lady know when the owner stepped up and told the lady that her food would be right out. The server and my mum were both confused as to what she was going to do. Well, this lady goes and literally digs through the fricking trash and pulls out some beef, some still with bone, and then she ran it through water, cooked it, and served it to that poor lady. My mum says the lady was even sucking the bone and she almost felt sick watching. My mum quit that job soon after. After writing this, I asked my mum again about it, and here is what she said. The bone/meat was not raw, it was left over from people who had ordered the same thing. They'd almost run out of that soup, and all the meat was gone, so they thought they couldn't serve anymore. The owner grabbed the bone from the trash, rinsed it and threw it back in what was left of the soup, heated up for a bit, and just served it. Just thought I needed to clarify this. I've worked at places that have gotten 100% on multiple occasions. The inspectors are usually the same few people in smaller areas and get to know people in the restaurants. If you have a good reputation, they come in and check the basics, give you a couple of soft infractions, and move on. If you have something that is a major violation, they will start to, rightfully, nitpick everything. I'm hearing a ton of horror stories and just want to point out something about my experience. I've worked at places the inspectors were easy on because they knew it was clean and had a good reputation. I've worked at one place that ended up having to get a follow-up and quit it soon after. That was the only time I'd seen anything too sketchy. I also worked at a place that regularly got 100% ratings, and let me tell you, we were not 100%. The owner wouldn't do crap to improve conditions either. Mice, several kind of bugs, ceiling literally leaking nasty-ass water, on some areas onto the food prep areas, and once the walk-in cooler broke for an entire 24-hour period, and he said to just keep the food like it didn't happen. If my experience in the restaurant business has told me anything, it's that all restaurants are freaking disgusting. But they won't get you sick most of the time, so if you don't think about it, it'll all be okay. Yep, I've worked in places that honestly were bursting at the seams with unsafe and unsanitary infractions just waiting to happen. Worked in some of them for years and somehow never saw a report on them. I worked as an assistant cook in a restaurant. 2 weeks into the job, I opened a cupboard to get a can of tomato sauce, and I see a huge tarantula scuttling away behind the cans. I told the boss what I'd seen, so that maybe we should get someone to deal with the huge spider living in the kitchen. Boss turns to me and says, "I see you've met Eduardo. Just don't put your hand too close to him, and you'll be good." Later, another cook proceeded to tell me that the spider had been living in there for 2 years, and they allowed it because it kept the rodents and roaches away. This is a true story, so know this. Every time you think about swatting a spider, remember that there's a possibility that a friendly spider is guarding your favorite restaurant's food against nasty critters. The spiders in my house and I have a verbal agreement that is pasted onto every generation of spider that takes up residency in my house. You may remain in my house as long as you don't come upstairs and you keep the ants, flies, and other household bugs that aren't you out of my house. I reserve the right to eliminate you and your webs at will without proper notice. I haven't had an ant in 4 years. I've had a few flies, but they seem to only be upstairs where the spiders aren't allowed. I've killed very few spiders. It's a good arrangement. Not a health inspector, but I've witnessed some things at my first job as a setup waitress at a banquet hall. The head cook had some hairy arms and he always mixed the salad with his hands. So you know that hair is getting in there, and one day we found a used band-aid in the salad. I survived the assassination attempt. My stepmother is the lead health inspector for a decent-sized suburban town. While I've never asked what the worst thing she witnessed as part of her job was, I do know that one instance was pretty gross. A truck full of lobsters was traveling down the highway and crashed. The police came and eventually they towed the truck. As a Board of Health inspector, my stepmother was consulted to see if any of the lobsters were viable, and she told them no. The load is a total loss since there were literally lobsters scattered across the highway covered in dirt and sand, etc.
Fast forward 24 hours and one of the restaurants in town ran a special, twin lobsters for $19. Apparently the owner of the trucking and towing company knew the restaurant owner pretty well, so they made a deal whereby the restaurant would pay a very discounted price for the road lobsters. The restaurant would turn around and illegally serve the lobsters to unsuspecting customers or sell them out of a truck behind the restaurant. I'm not sure what the repercussions were, but I think they were shut down for like a week. They closed shortly thereafter, and now there's a new restaurant there. The towing company lost their contract to tow vehicles and semi-trucks with the town and the state. It's crazy that they didn't think the health inspector would figure it out. It's their job. Mysteriously cheap lobster after a huge highway crash involving lobsters? I thought that there would be insurance for things like lobster crashes. And now I realize how ridiculous that was as I typed it. Never mind. You aren't covered for lobster crashes on your insurance plan? Weird. Insurance agent here. If you buy lobster crash insurance, we will find a way to not pay anything at all. It was an act of cod. Close enough. Talking 10 years as an inspector. Most dangerous is usually not the most disgusting. I've seen entire walk-in coolers at 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the staff didn't even notice anything wrong. I've seen piles of mice that died getting stuck in grease behind the fryer. I've seen staff throwing raw burgers within the grill, then making a salad right after with their bare hands. I've seen squirrels and birds roaming freely inside a bread manufacturer. The stereotypes, unfortunately, are true. Chinese restaurants are almost always filthy. The most common critical violation? Dish machine not sanitizing properly. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.